Hey guys, tonight we're not sailing anywhere. No pirates, no salt air, no soggy wooden boats that smell like regrets and dead fish. Instead, we're stepping into a far stranger ocean, the one ruled by the absolute worst kings history ever produced. Not the elegant, crown-polished, portrait-friendly kings. Not the smiling from a coin kings. I mean the real ones, the unstable, the chaotic, the catastrophically unqualified kings whose decisions were so baffling that entire nations basically stood up and said, "You know what? Absolutely not." Kings so disastrous they accidentally invented new rights, new laws, and in the case of one especially dramatic English monarch, a little thing called the Magna Carta. But before we wander into their royal disasters, go ahead and like the video and subscribe, but only if this kind of quiet, weird historical storytelling actually helps you relax. If not, that's fine. Even the worst kings didn't get approval ratings from everyone. Leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. It's always 2 a.m. somewhere, and if you're here, you're probably trying to fall asleep to the soothing thought that no matter how messy your day was, at least you didn't plunge a kingdom into economic ruin because you really liked falcons or gambling or unnecessary wars. Now dim the lights. Switch on a fan for that soft, cozy white noise. Get comfortable, and maybe tuck your feet in under a blanket, not to keep rats away this time, but just in case a ghostly medieval tax collector wanders by to demand payment on behalf of a king who hasn't been alive for 1,000 years. Let's pause for a moment. Have you ever wondered what it actually felt like to live under a king whose brain seemed to be doing its own freestyle performance? What it was like to wake up and think, is the king declaring war today, or is he just hosting another week-long feast because he's bored and wants to show off his very expensive, very unnecessary dancing bear? What did ordinary people think when their king started believing he was chosen by God to make decisions no sane person would defend? What did it feel like when taxes kept rising but the king's competence definitely wasn't? And how did we get from all that chaos to a moment where a group of frustrated barons finally stared down King John of England, took a deep breath, and handed him a document that basically said, "Okay, enough. We need rules." Tonight, we're going to drift into that world, not to judge it, not to fear it, but to observe it gently, calmly, from the comfort of your warm bed. So take a slow breath in, let the noise of the modern world melt away, and imagine a time where crowns were heavy, decisions were questionable, and entire kingdoms tried to survive the whims of rulers who probably should have been given a nap, a therapist, and maybe a less powerful job. This is the story of the worst kings in history, their madness, their mistakes, and the strange, accidental brilliance that eventually helped shape the world we live in. Settle in, close your eyes if you haven't already, and let the story begin. Chapter 1: The Little Boots Who Walked Among Giants. And now, let your breath drift slow and easy as we step into the cold, iron-scented world of Rome's northern frontier, a place where the mist clings to pine trees, the river growls softly under its ice, and the wind carries that low, ancient warning that whispers, there are better vacation spots than the Rhine. Picture this: a rugged Roman military camp. Not the glamorous kind from marble monuments, the real version, with muddy boots, dented helmets, smoky fires, and soldiers who look like they've fought both barbarians and the weather on the same exhausting morning. Leather tents sag under frost. Shields rest in tidy rows, catching the pale light of dawn. Veteran soldiers stand like carved statues, scarred, stoic, wrapped in wool cloaks that smell like smoke and hard days. And, in the middle of them, a child. A small boy, maybe 6 or 7 years old, with cheeks still round from youth and eyes that shine with the unbothered confidence that only children and truly dangerous emperors ever possess. His name is Gaius Julius Caesar Germanicus, but the legions call him something else. Caligula, Little Boots, because he wears a miniature soldier's uniform, a tiny tunic, tiny belt, and most importantly, tiny leather boots that match the ones worn by the legionaries he admires. The soldiers adore him. And how could they not? He marches beside them with toy-sized determination, salutes with a seriousness far beyond his age, and stands proudly among men twice, 3 times, even 4 times his height. To the hardened warriors of the Rhine, this boy is not just a commander's son, he is a mascot, a spark of warmth in a world of cold iron. He wanders through the camp with the authority of someone who believes fully, sincerely that the world is already his friend. A soldier sharpens his sword. The boy mimics the motion with an imaginary blade. A centurion gives orders. The boy repeats them in a tiny but commanding voice, and the men around him pretend to obey, grinning into their cloaks. He sits on a shield, like it's a throne. He pats the snouts of war horses with no fear at all. He listens to tales of battle with wide, fascinated eyes, and then retells them later with dramatic embellishment that makes the veterans laugh harder than any victory feast. And yet, beneath all this sweetness, beneath the charm and the childish pride, a strange truth flickers quietly. The legions are shaping him, not with lessons, but simply by being who they are. He grows up among scars and discipline, among men who swear loyalty with blood and steel, among the harsh winds that batter northern forts and the drums that echo across the Rhine like distant thunder. In this world, power is constant. Fear is normal. Obedience is survival. Little Boots absorbs it all, with the sponge-like intensity only children possess. The soldiers see a mascot. History sees a warning. Because this confident little boy walking proudly through the frost will one day become emperor and not the gentle kind. Caligula, the man, will be remembered for madness, cruelty, extravagance, and terror. But Caligula, the child, was just a boy playing dress-up among giants. He had no idea what was waiting for him. No idea how far the shadows of power would follow him. No idea how history would twist his story into something dark and unforgettable. For now, he is only Little Boots laughing, marching, saluting, the Rhine wind tugging at his tiny cloak. A child surrounded by legions, standing proudly among men who saw greatness in him and never guessed the shape it would take. Breathe gently with this moment. Let the winter air settle and drift deeper into the story. Chapter 2. The shadows that gathered behind the Little Boots. And now, let your breath settle again as we drift a little further down the winding corridors of Roman memory, away from the snowy camps of the Rhine, away from the laughter of soldiers who adored a little boy in tiny boots, and into the dimmer places where power begins to whisper to the young. Because childhood doesn't last long in imperial Rome, especially not for a boy born into a family that balanced glory on one side and danger on the other. Picture this: Gaius, still small, still bright-eyed, still wearing his little uniform, sits beside his parents in a tent lit by a single oil lamp. The shadows stretch long across the canvas, turning the flickering flame into a kind of soft, restless heartbeat. His father, Germanicus, the beloved hero of the legions, speaks in low, careful tones. His mother, Agrippina, fierce and alert, listens with attention that even a child can feel. Little Boots tilts his head, sensing something he can't yet understand, that the dangers outside the camp are nothing compared to the dangers inside Rome itself. He doesn't know that his father's popularity makes jealous men nervous. He doesn't know that emperors fear loyalty they cannot control. He doesn't know that politics in Rome is less like a river and more like a snake pit wearing a polite smile. But children notice things, especially children who grow up under watchful, worried eyes. He hears the urgent whispering, the arguments carried out in muffled tones, the footsteps of messengers arriving too late at night, the armor shifting uneasily outside the tent flap. A storm is gathering not in the cold north, but in the heart of the empire, and in the middle of that slow-building tension stands a boy in soldier's boots who still thinks the world is as simple as marching beside the men who love him. Time moves forward. The Rhine winds blow colder, rumors drift through the camp, like frost. Germanicus becomes ill, too suddenly. The legions suspect poison, Agrippina suspects murder, and the small boy, who once marched proudly between Roman giants, suddenly finds himself surrounded not by laughter, but by grief. Caligula stands at his father's funeral pyre, the orange glow rising into the dark sky, dancing in his eyes like something ancient and painful waking inside him. The soldiers weep openly, something rare for men who survive battlefields. They kneel before the boy and swear loyalty to him the way they once swore to his father. It is a kindness. It is also a burden, because loyalty that deep is the kind that makes emperors in Rome feel threatened. From this moment forward, Little Boots is no longer cute, no longer harmless, no longer simply the boy the legions love. He is a symbol, a legacy, a potential rival, and in the dangerous mathematics of imperial power, that makes him someone to watch, someone to control. someone to fear. A shadow forms behind him, one that grows quietly, patiently, out of trauma, loss, and the strange mixture of being adored and being hunted at the same time. For now, he is still small, still grieving, still unsure of the world shifting beneath his feet, but something inside him has changed. Something has started to crack, slowly, quietly, like ice just before it breaks. Breathe gently. Let the campfires fade, and drift with the boy who once walked proudly in tiny boots, as he begins to walk deeper into the labyrinth of power. Asterisk, asterisk. Chapter 3. Mourning in the shadows of conspiracy. Asterisk, asterisk. As you settle deeper into the folds of your cozy blanket, the air thickens like a clammy fog, and you find yourself enveloped in a scene of silent grief, a heavy veil draped over a gathering that feels more like an over-the-top soap opera than a dignified mourning ceremony. Picture this: sunlit Roman gardens, vibrant with the sound of chirping birds and the distant laughter of children, turning into an arena of whispers, frowns, and sidelong glances as the heart of a nation mourns. You awaken in the year 19 CE, in a lavish but not overly tasteful villa where the decor seems to scream wealthy general louder than a peacock at a crow convention. The garden is lush, yet it carries an unsettling air, and amidst the blooming roses lay the recently departed body of Germanicus, a soldier revered across Rome for his military prowess. And yes, it does feel suspiciously like the setup of a dramatic reality show. Have you ever been at a funeral where everyone looks like they are auditioning for a role in a tragedy? It's slightly uncomfortable, isn't it? You try to keep a straight face, but the side-eye glances cast by attendees can make anyone squirm like they just tried to sit on a bee. Here, however, the awkwardness levels are cranked up to 11 as Germanicus's wife, the unsuspecting Agrippina, fights back tears while trying to decipher who among the gathered is actually sobbing for their loss and who is merely practicing their theatrical skills for the next big amphitheater role. As whispers settle around the villa like ill-fated guests refusing to leave after the party's over, you can't help but note the fine line between lamentation and suspicion. A murmured note questions the cause. Was it truly a heart attack from the stresses of warfare, or perhaps a well-placed dose of poison garnished with an apricot? Now, that's one way to take your last meal. You can almost hear them thinking, was he really a victim, or merely another pawn in a game where the stakes are all too high? Wives in the audience prattle like magpies, and men sport expressions like they had just bitten into an unripe pomegranate, confused and slightly horrified. A very puzzled young lad, the heir apparent named Caligula, yes, that Caligula sits off to the side, clutching a toy sword, and looking angrier than a bakery that accidentally sold all its croissants. You can practically see the infant thoughts whirling in his head about avenging his father. How does one get back at the people who might have offed dad? The future emperor's mind is ablaze with ideas that might make modern parenting books cringe in horror. Imagine that. The poor kid has to navigate his adolescent emotions while simultaneously dealing with what appears to be a plot thicker than your aunt's famous Thanksgiving gravy, except this one definitely doesn't taste nearly as good. Fast forward a few feeble years from today's funeral. You'll notice that whispers about Germanicus's demise have reached the public, wiggling their way through the streets of Rome like a particularly nosy cat. Caligula has survived to childhood, and you might imagine the other kids are teasing him. Your dad was murdered. Mine just works an office job. Oh, the nerve. And you thought your middle school was rough. The rumors take on lives of their own, twisting and turning until they form a narrative that even the best bards wouldn't dare to perform. Agrippina corners every senator, every celebratory spouse. Who was it? Which one of you wanted my husband dead? You can't help but chuckle at the absurdity of the situation. It's a soap opera charmingly crafted with the kind of political intrigue usually reserved for pizza delivery disputes, except, of course, stakes include public power, honor, and the potential to dodge a dagger or two. As dinner parties grow quieter and people begin to bleed their wine glasses out for some juicy gossip around the palace table, imagine trying to be the friend who didn't want to spill the beans on the, let's say, inappropriate behavior of your cousins. How do you even begin digesting all of that familial drama without accidentally choking on your bread? It's like witnessing your family at Thanksgiving, where half of them are arguing politics and the other half are arguing which way the turkey should be carved, only everyone is slightly more motivated to stab someone. And, of course, you have the wise old uncle who puts down his bowl of mushy peas, just so he can quietly contemplate the question. Why polish a sword if there's no one to fight? That's right, the tension is thick enough to slice like the bread you awkwardly clattered against your ancestral china. As Caligula grows into the role of an emperor, he is plummeting into a cascade of lunacy, like it's an Olympic event. His upbringing, heavily peppered with the need to avenge his father's death, and under the scrutiny of those who might have taken him for a twirling marionette, sets the stage for a reign that would be much more madcap than magnificent. Each day brings fresh conspiracies, a new array of friends turned enemies, and a rather entertaining yet dimly lit timeline begging for a laughing audience. You might just wish you could settle into a chair and have a bowl of popcorn. But, alas, you're just here to grab a cushion and relax, drawing breath amid the chaos that history has so charmingly served you, while laughter and intrigue begin to fade into the background murmur of dreams. Wouldn't it be lovely to drift into sleep while wrapping your mind around a history that's every bit as absurd as relocating a sheep to a knight's armored chest? Sleep tight. Asterisk asterisk. Chapter 4, The Empire Strikes Back. Sort of asterisk asterisk. Now that you're cozied up, let's step into a world that's as colorful as a bag of Skittles and just as chaotic. Welcome to ancient Rome, where the streets are alive with the hustle and bustle of toga-clad citizens flaunting their finest looks. Like there's a fabulous gala tonight, and they forgot their invitation. Here, the scent of roasted meats and suspiciously pungent olive oil wafts through the air, mingling with the sound of bartering, laughter, and the occasional shout of "watch out for that horse." Picture this. You awaken in 37 CE, and everything feels just a tad too extravagant, like a wedding cake adorned with a dragon. You glance around the decadent room with more gold than a rapper's chain collection, and there sits young Caligula, our not-so-great emperor, on a throne of plush cushions adorned with images of tiny eagles, a symbol of Rome's might, or maybe just a perfect conversation piece for those awkward silences at dinner parties. Now, have you ever wondered who decides the decor of a dedicated madman's throne room? I mean, the child's wearing a glittering toga that practically screams, "Look at me," while also whispering, "Help me." But have no fear. This kid's about to unfold a reign that'll have you questioning whether sanity was ever really on the agenda. Your new best friend, Caligula, hasn't just inherited some fancy robes and a knack for ruling, no. He's also been handed a cosmic jackpot of family drama thicker than a double-stuffed pizza. You know that feeling when your family gathers for the holidays, and it's like a dyslexic game of charades gone wrong. Now multiply that chaos by 10, throw in some knives, and sprinkle generously with madness. Let's take a moment to address the curious case of Caligula's rise. Can you picture the poor guy waiting for a moment to shine, trapped under the colossal shadow of his famous family like a cat, waiting to pounce on a benevolent laser pointer? Because while everyone else is busy polishing their daggers of politics, Caligula is secretly planning his next spectacularly bizarre move. Ever tried to get attention in a room full of peacocks? Exactly. Speaking of bizarre, let's examine Caligula's captivating knack for fun. You might think he'd want to throw a party for all his pals and emperor's housewarming, where they bust out the libations and cheese platters of magnificence. But no, this is the emperor who once declared he was a god and commanded his faithful subjects to worship him, probably while trying to remain humble enough to tell you how much he loves the people. It's a real fine line to walk, isn't it? Imagine Caligula, wrapped in all this glorious chaos, dramatically declaring to his court that he was going to make his horse, Incitatus, a consul. You might find yourself struggling to relate. Wait, are we just skipping over qualifications? Here, I mean, what's next? The goldfish as the advisor on state affairs. But this is Rome, and you've just stepped into a realm where absurdity is practically written into the architecture of the Forum. As Caligula's insanity escalates, you can almost hear the gasps of senators from the marble corridors all around, their righteousness feeling as flimsy as a rabbit fur in a rainstorm. Oh dear, what has our esteemed emperor concocted now? You may wonder, as he smiles with all the charm of a cat who just knocked over a priceless vase. Picture senators sitting there at their grand tables, nibbling on jugs of wine and pondering how to deal with the roller coaster ride of their emperor's mind. So he's going to ride into battle on a chariot pulled by sea creatures? Remarkable, isn't it? Much like asking your neighbor to help you move your heavy sofa, only to find he shows up with a bottle of soda and a bemused look. Now, disaster never looks too far behind a picture. Crown jewel in crisis. Because what's the natural response when your young ruler decides to toy with the fate of the empire? frantic senators start sharpening their quills like they might take a stab at writing up some serious legislation, only to realize, wait, this is actually our future at stake. Too late, lads, Caligula's in for the ride, and it's going to be a bumpy one, dotted with minor disasters and budding hilarity that you can't help but chuckle at. So, as you drift into dreams, gently holding on to the phrase, "this too shall pass," like it's the last slice of pizza at a party, try to recall that hilarious lunacy of Caligula's reign. You can just picture how it might have looked: a cavalcade of horses, a horse-turned consul, and a potential meltdown of an empire being planned like a cocktail party gone awry. Rest easy, dear traveler. As absurd as your adventure through the halls of history may feel tonight, sleep will wash over you like a gentle tide, washing away the echoes of laughter and madness. It's a mad, mad world, perfect for dreaming that just might edge on the bizarre side. Sleep tight. Asterisk, asterisk. Chapter 5. Gold, glitter, and gasping for change. Asterisk, asterisk. Now that you've settled in, and perhaps finished a delightful internal debate about how to artfully dodge your neighbor's cat, let's slip into a world where excess is not just a luxury, but a daily meal. Welcome to the lavish palace of Caligula, where gold is the wallpaper, laughter echoes like a cacophony of suggestions gone wrong, and food is piled high enough to create a scenic overlook. Imagine stepping into a banquet hall that makes your most chaotic family gatherings look like a potluck at a retirement home. The walls gleam like they've been polished by the hands of excited children, and every corner seems to lean heavily on the weight of extravagance. The air smells rich, heady with the aroma of roasted peacock, softened by a hint of rich perfume that could make Cleopatra's nose twitch with jealousy. The tables are laden with food, stacked like a particularly ambitious card house, threatening to topple over at any moment. Leeks, figs, and boar's head are mingling like enthusiastic party guests, each vying for attention while drowning under a tidal wave of wine that flows free enough to confuse a river for a drinking fountain. Have you ever seen someone try to drink a gallon of chocolate milk through a straw? Well, this is like that, just with a lot more foreshadowing of indigestion. As you navigate through the feasting masses, listen closely, and you might hear whispers of worried financiers bemoaning the rapidly draining treasury. Picture them huddled together, clutching their calculators like treasures from a shipwreck as they lament. It's only been a month, and I already can't afford a loaf of bread. Really, who knew that feeding a colossal ego could deplete a kingdom's resources faster than a shopping spree at a boutique for unicorns? Let's pause for a moment and think about Caligula. Here's a young emperor who believes he is divine, a bit like your friend, who insists they're the main character in the story of your sorry little lives. He doesn't just enjoy throwing out extravagant galas. He demands that his loyal subjects join in the festivities, whether they like it or not. Picture this: dedicated courtiers gathering with half-hearted smiles as they partake in yet another meal, featuring the famed boar à la decadence, while sneaking away side-eye glances that basically scream, "I can't believe I'm trapped in a culinary prank show." And then there's the entertainment. You'd expect some operatic marvel, or maybe gladiatorial throwdowns. But no, Caligula fancied a few games of a different nature, perhaps involving wild animals, his horse, and why not a collection of folks who simply didn't get out of the way fast enough. Ever attend a party where you thought, oh boy, this is going to end badly? Now, imagine that, but with lions and an emperor's questionable decision-making skills. The sheer ridiculousness of this banquet reaches staggering heights. You might be transported into a scene where Caligula, wearing the equally absurd emperor's hat of excess, yells, "Let the imports roll in. I want silk. I want spices. I want..." And you can hear the nervous clinking of coins as the grandiloquent role of the treasury is slowly turning into a very dramatic game of Monopoly where all the money has been replaced with colorful jelly beans. But let's reflect on something morosely comical. While everyone else is dancing the night away, feasting as though the apocalypse is just around the corner, the lower classes are outside gazing through windows as if watching a poorly made reality show. Frustration overflows as they chant, "Hey buddy, mind sharing some of that grub?" at the sneering figures inside, who only respond with the affectionate flick of a grape-stained wrist. Meanwhile, Caligula, amid this bubbling fountain of excess, looks around with the satisfied grin of a cat that just knocked over a family photo. He'd add another layer of foam to his champion's victory drinks, thinking, what's a little more gold on the banquet table when I can purchase a lavish bubble bath decorated with the tears of underwater creatures? At this point, You might be rolling your eyes, as if to say, why have we not stopped this madness? Well, dear friend, you'd be amazed how quickly a royal decree can silence a room of dissent. Picture senators scribbling furiously, sharing glances that say, let's just wait until he calms down. Then maybe we can order takeout, instead of the head of some unfortunate animal. Caligula's lavish lifestyle led to a banquet of lunacy that left the treasury gasping for air like a fish tossed out of its bowl. It's a bit of a cosmic joke, isn't it, that a few wild parties could send shockwaves through a kingdom. It's like getting a pizza delivered at 2 a.m., only to find out half the available toppings are based on the decision-making skills of an over-caffeinated hamster. As you settle back into your blankets, perhaps chuckling at the absurdity of it all, take a moment to reflect. Life may not always hand you a banquet hall of gold and silk, but we all have our own rich tapestry of madness to enjoy. So, drift off into dreams, my friend, where hopefully you aren't in charge of managing an empire riddled with lunatics, and where the only royal decree involves staying in bed a little longer. Asterisk, asterisk, Chapter 6, Caligula's Divine Disaster Overdrive, asterisk, asterisk. Hey guys, welcome back to this realm of mildly interesting historical absurdity, where we take a soothing stroll through the annals of time, and maybe trip over a few of history's bad decisions. Tonight, we hop on a time machine set to 37 CE, more specifically, to the extravagant, palm-frond fanning, eyebrow-raising court of one Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, better known as Caligula. Now, imagine if you will a colossal golden statue of this charismatic, yet undeniably kooky emperor being erected in a sacred temple, complete with a grandiose demand for worship that rivals even that of toddler tantrums over candy. What would that even look like? Will it be streaming live? Will the cats of Rome take selfies? Can you even imagine the hashtags, like number Caligula goes gold and number look at me worship me? Prepare your minds for a gentle ride as we step into this bizarre slice of history, where gold shines brighter than your neighbor's flashy car, and reality is just a suggestion. And as you snuggle down into your pillow fort, I kindly ask you to like, subscribe, and comment only if you enjoy this, of course, because who needs the added pressure of public approval when we've got a statue of Caligula awaiting judgment of the ages? Now, picture this. You've just awakened in the midst of the Roman Empire. The air is thick with the aroma of incense, mingling oddly with the lingering scent of whatever seafood dish they decided to attempt but completely butchered at the last banquet. Was it a fish? A slightly disheveled octopus? Or maybe just a really aggressive clam? Who knows? But it's the first day of construction on Caligula's statue, and the stakes have never been higher or lower, depending on your perspective on prior emperors. As you shuffle into the bustling crowd of anxious Roman citizens, your senses are assaulted by a riot of colors, sounds, and smells. You might feel as if you've accidentally wandered into a costume party or an episode of a rather eccentric reality show. The street is alive with murmurs, gasps, and the occasional enthusiastic debate about which enhances a statue more, a snazzy toga or a flamboyant crown. You can hear fishermen bickering about the precise emotional weight of their daily catch while arguing who makes the best clam chowder. For a split second, there's hope. Maybe this won't be so bad. Let's focus on the Holy Shrine, where work begins on a statue that looms almost as large as Caligula's audacity. First, you spot the artisans, hunched over their chisels like they're performing an ancient form of dancing with the stars, minus the glitter and sequins. Each one is practically fighting for the title of most likely to make Caligula look good, and quite frankly, they're not winning on all fronts. The statue is supposed to capture his likeness gloriously, but the result often flirted dangerously close to a cross. Between a potato and someone who's just seen a ghost, it becomes clear that the marble they're using may not possess the refined elegance one would expect. In fact, it appears more reminiscent of overbaked bread, the kind you'd quietly shove behind the fridge when guests arrive. I mean, how do you convincingly carve divine from what looks like a rejected loaf? The artisans giggle nervously, whispering about how one chip could turn their emperor into the next Roman meme sensation. Meanwhile, the undercurrents of panic swirl through the citizens like an angry mob of bees after a failed democracy project. Worship? Us? A golden statue carved from potentially misshapen bread. A fellow citizen might mutter while clutching his tunic. You really think I should bow down to that? I've seen far more dignity in my neighbor's goat. And yet, the whispers of what happens if they refuse to worship the mental image of an emperor throwing an absolute tantrum like a child. Denied their favorite dessert remains a frightful thought echoing in their minds. Did I mention the gleaming gold that was promised? Have you ever seen a cat try to catch a sunbeam? Well, take that gleeful frenzy, multiply it by a few dozen hyperactive toddlers, and you get a fraction of the sheer madness that comes from Roman citizens trying to outshine each other in worship. Dueling chants, honeyed praises, and children slipping on crushed figs create a comedic chaos that somehow becomes the soundtrack of their daily lives. You can practically hear their collective consciousness whispering, "How did we get here at all?" Ah, but isn't history just one big comedy of errors? While the grand unveiling draws near, the question remains, will the citizens offer genuine reverence to a statue with an uncanny resemblance to someone who had, let's be real, questionable fashion choices? Or will they craft clever critiques and humorous ellipses to dismiss the madness they're being forced to witness? As you drift back into the enchanting fabric of your dreams, maybe you'll find yourself in a world where statues aren't shiny symbols of questionable governance but rather charming mementos of delightful chaos. History, after all, has never been short on providing us with a good laugh as long as you're willing to embrace the oddly shaped potatoes along the way. So, let's float you off into dreams of marble quirks and golden absurdities, where hopefully your biggest problem is picking a favorite pastry, not deciding between honoring a questionable monument or diving face first into your neighbor's goat for comfort. Chapter 7. Caligula's Abysmal and Surreal Showdown. Ah, welcome back, dear dreamers. Now that you've settled into your cozy sleep cocoon, let's gently tumble further into the quagmire of time and discuss one particularly absurd day in the life of the emperor from beyond the sanity spectrum. Picture this like attending a bizarre improv show, but half the actors are armed with togas instead of swords, and the other half are losing their minds over whether or not a cabbage deserves a place in the Senate. Ever pondered what it might be like to attend a meeting where potentates argue not about matters of state but about the merits of different tunic styles? Ever thought, should I dress for the occasion or just hope they don't notice my sandals from last season? How about imagining a world where fancier was better, but the potential to trip over your own toga was a constant undercurrent of drama? Now, let me transport you right into the essence of Rome. Congratulations, you've just awakened in 37 CE, in an imperial palace overflowing with more marble than an overzealous sculptor could ever dream of chipping. Your first thoughts are these. Where's the coffee? Is it too early for backstabbing? Believe me, when it comes to the court of Caligula, the air is thick with more tension than the final moments of a reality TV elimination. You hear clattering sandals as senators shuffle nervously through the grand corridor, their expressions veering between dread and sheer disbelief. It's a spectacle, yes, a parade that looks like a cross between a funeral and an awkward reunion, where everyone knows the stakes, but no one wants to address why Caligula decided to host an afternoon of worship or be whacked. As you watch from your cozy corner, surrounded by fragrant incense, trying to mask the slight fishy aroma lingering from last night's banquet fiasco, truly, a fish stew will only ever remind you that calamari was a mistake. Looks like the show is beginning. Imagine robed senators, usually bursting with pompous bravado, now reduced to little more than terrified extras in a tragicomedy. They've been ordered to prostrate themselves on the marble floor, which must feel like inviting over a friend whose cooking left much to be desired. Here they are, dressed in all the finery, looking tragically out of place while doing their best impressions of oddly shaped soufflés. Okay, guys, just lie down and hope he's in a good mood. One senator mutters, desperately trying to avoid the gaze of a man who once suggested appointing a horse to a high office. Yes, Caligula still believed his trusty steed could be a decent consul. When you thought your ex's idea of a pet project was bad, remember, it gets worse. A chorus of "O Great Caligula" begins to rise and fall, a thoroughly ridiculous tune wrought with desperation. It's like trying to sing while simultaneously holding your breath and pretending to enjoy the scent of burnt offerings. "Oh, what a splendid haircut you have today," one senator might shout, desperately hoping that flattery alone will stave off inevitable doom. You can almost hear a distant chuckle from the emperor himself, seated atop an ornamental throne that, let's be honest, is more extravagant than functional. Courageously, one senator flops down, carpet bombing their dignity in pursuit of self-preservation. Picture it, the swish of elaborate robes on polished marble, and the not-so-subtle slide of a dinner alone gone awry. Ah, yes, My glorious plan to overthrow the emperor. Oh wait, did I just accidentally faceplant in front of the riffraff? Can you imagine the hustle and tussle? It's practically Shakespeare meets the kitchen disasters of an amateur cooking class. As you begin to doze off, the drama intensifies. Imagine the near-absurd contrast of gallant noblemen wishing to avoid harm, while silently judging the design of their fellow senators' fashion choices. Is it really all about loyalty, when your peers are practically licking the emperor's sandals while clutching their bank accounts for dear life? You can practically hear the whispers. If only I had chosen cotton instead of wool. Would my fate have changed if I had worn pants instead of a skirt? It becomes obvious. This scene is less about worship and more about an embarrassing episode in tumble-worthy humility. While calamity unfolds around them, one can only wonder how many of them desperately plot their escape routes, whether through cleverly faked heart attacks or simply rolling under their togas and praying invisibility became a reality. Meanwhile, the glory of worship that once sounded so luxurious devolves into a cacophony of flipping robes and indecipherable apologies, the true Roman meltdown. It's almost like a chaotic ballet, performed on slippery marble, only with far less grace and considerably more panic. One could only think, did I recently eat rancid fish? Or are these the echoes of countless awkward nights? So, in this odd shimmering hodgepodge of hilarity and humiliation, ask yourself, dear listener, do these senators really care about an emperor's divine connections? Or are they merely hoping to survive another day while sidestepping the absurdity unfolding before them? Which poor soul will have to grace the emperor with a compliment about his haircut, while silently contemplating whether it's time to book a flight to anywhere but Rome? As you slip gently into the comfort of slumber, remember that, even in the most chaotic of times, the universe always finds ways to remind us. Sometimes, laughter really is the best defense against a madman wielding a toga, or in this case, an almost glorified statue of himself. Let the echoes of history roll serenely in your dreams, reminding you that even the mighty can occasionally find themselves face first in the unfortunate absurdity of life. Now, drift away and collect those whimsical thoughts like timeless treasures, as the world outside your pillow fort continues to whirl about like an overstuffed toga caught in a breeze. Sleep well, as the true escapades of history will wait just beyond the dawn to be retold. Asterisk, asterisk, Chapter 8, The Marble Mishap of Caligula's Head, asterisk, asterisk. You've now sunk deeper into the tapestry of time, and before you lies an infamously peculiar chapter of Roman history. Let's set the scene, shall we? Picture yourself standing in a sun-drenched studio, its walls adorned with statues of illustrious heroes and braying goats, which, to be fair, seems like a weird mix. But we're talking ancient Rome here, and nothing quite makes sense. You're inhaling the rich scent of stone dust, and a hint of something that might be moldy cheese wafting in from a neighboring workshop. Ironically, that cheese might well be the least disturbing thing in this place. As you gaze around, you notice a sculptor, a chap with a face more serious than a cat, contemplating the existential dread of its ninth nap. He is hunched over a block of marble, chiseling meticulously. This isn't just any marble, oh no. It's the creme de la creme of rocks, tidally quarried from Italy's finest mountains, and, by the looks of it, this piece is meant to replace a beloved statue of a Roman god. But wait, what's this? Instead of the expected noble visage, he's working on a grimly realistic representation of none other than Emperor Caligula himself, yes, the same fellow known for his pet horse and inexplicable love for moonlit horse races. Now, let's take a moment to ponder the poor decision-making skills of this sculptor. Had he lost a bet? Was he hoping to impress Caligula with this dubious artistic endeavor? Oh, I know. I'll carve a statue of the mad emperor's own likeness. Because who wouldn't want to commemorate the man's questionable judgment with a life-size marble version of his own goofy face? Brilliant plan, my dear sculptor. Everyone loves a good giggle at their own expense unless you happen to be the butt of the joke. Imagine standing there, lost in your own thoughts, when suddenly, a pair of sandals claps loudly against the cold marble floor. You turn to see a gang of senators weaving through this artistic chaos, and their expressions range from skepticism to pure horror. Did he just replace Jupiter with Caligula? One whispers, glancing nervously back at the portrait of the emperor, now eternally frozen in a grimace that looks shocking close to last night's bad wine hangover. Isn't it fantastic? The sculptor prattles with a glint in his eye, clearly oblivious to the tide of dread rising before him. It captures the very essence of a man who ordered his own statue to be made taller than those of the gods. Ah yes, the first rule of public admiration, nothing says, trust me, like sculpting a statue of yourself, gazing enviously at the rest of the pantheon in inert life. As the sculptor resumes work on the uncanny likeness, the senators continue their worried chatter. What a bold statement, one remarks, scratching his chin. On the one hand, it's a beautiful representation. On the other hand, well, it's Caligula. The struggles of a doublethink artist in Rome, trying to stay alive while pandering to a certified lunatic. Can you picture these esteemed senators gathering by candlelight? What a mess we've made of politics. But have you seen the statue? Caligula or not, that's got some serious marble muscle. Meanwhile, the sculptor, blissfully ignorant of the underlying tension, like a dog chasing its tail, doesn't realize the absurdity of the entire scene around him. He wipes the sweat from his brow and leans back, admiring his work. One day, this will be hailed as a masterpiece, he exclaims, sending ripples of nervous laughter through the group. Here's a thought. What do you think will happen when Caligula walks in? And what kind of review will this instant classic get? Incredible work, very true to my mood post-feast. Must be nice to be the master of your own holiday party, isn't it? Imagine the sculptor's gasp of despair as Caligula stomps in, his toga swirling dramatically. What treachery is this? He bellows, examining his likeness. The sculptor's tongue ties itself in knots as he stumbles to find the right words. I swear it looks just like you, the brave man who dared to shake the heavens. Because nothing diffuses tension quite like hero worship, and let's be honest, Caligula isn't exactly known for his self-awareness. The emperor squints at the statue. Is it meant to flatter me? Or will it mock me in old age? A pause. Then he grins. Ah, the debate becomes debatable. In a dramatic flourish, Caligula grasps the sculptor's shoulders, who is now sweating like a Roman at a summer festival. My friend, are you truly prepared to immortalize my glory? Perhaps a bronze of my horse next. The sculptor, caught between artistic ambition and self-preservation, nods vigorously. Absolutely, O great emperor. I'm sure your horse will be a smash hit. Perhaps with wings? Nothing says power like a flying horse. As Caligula's laughter echoes, it's not clear who is more ridiculous, the emperor or the man willing to turn his entire career into a tribute to horsey glory. And so, as the sculptor continues to chip away, with dreams of immortality nestled tightly among fears of losing his head or worse, being forced to create an airbrushed mural of Caligula as a triumphant deity, this intimate marble moment becomes an era-defining joke, still echoed amongst the yawning marble halls of history. Because if there's one lesson to be learned among gods and emperors, it's that immortality can come with its own set of unwarranted expectations, especially when one decides that a statue of oneself is the pinnacle of achievement. So, as you drift off, let this absurd adventure burrow into your dreams. Consider how talent, ambition, and a sprinkle of madness can collide under the oppressive gaze of a bizarre empire. Perhaps, while blessed with sleep, you might ponder what mishap awaits the next weary sculptor working under the reign of a modern-day Caligula in an equally absurd universe. Now, relax and let the echoes of marble chisel your way into serenity as you join the ranks of history's unwitting comedians, all while snuggled up snugly in your bed, dreamily escaping the madness of days gone by. ***. Chapter 9. Pope John XII, the holy teen who partied like it, was 1215 ***. Hey guys. Tonight, we're about to unravel something juicier than a medieval peasant's fruit stew. You see, once upon a time in 1215, the papal throne became less of a seat for spiritual guidance and more of a springboard for debauchery. Imagine a doe-eyed 18-year-old, looking less like a holy man and more like that rebellious cousin who turned up at family gatherings expecting you to join their rave party. What kind of trouble could this kid get into, you ask? Picture this. A papacy fueled by teenage angst and an endless supply of wine. Before we dive in, if you happen to enjoy this delightful mix of humor and history, it would be just peachy if you could like, subscribe, and maybe even drop a comment below. But only if you actually enjoy this. We're not trying to win the popularity contest of medieval mischief here. Now, dim those lights, unleash the fan like it's a medieval court jester, and settle in. Let's ponder a few absurd questions while you make yourself comfortable. Have you ever tried to manage an empire from your parents' basement, while simultaneously throwing the biggest sleepover for all your friends? How about making big decisions like declaring war, while also deciding what snacks to put on the table? Ever considered that perhaps your last hangover was, in fact, a test run for a future Popesque crisis? Congratulations, you've just woken up in 1215, where the air smells suspiciously like incense, and last night's feasting leftovers mingle with something you'd rather not identify. Welcome to Rome, where the Lateran Palace's lavish halls echo with shenanigans that make your last family reunion look like a solemn church retreat. Let's talk about Pope John XII. Picture him, swaddled in luxurious fabrics that you'd only dream of, and probably invented a social media hashtag just for this moment, something like #papal party. As he takes the throne, he has quite a few responsibilities: blessing people, leading the church, and, oh yes, indulging in all the delights that life has to offer. The poor folks in the Vatican, well, let's just say they were about to encounter the most scandalous roller coaster of papal history, and it was going to be an unholy ride. Suddenly, you're flung into the grandeur of the Lateran Palace. The walls gleam with gold, while the air is perfumed with the aroma of an exotic potion brewed from dubious herbs and maybe too many fermented grapes. Ah yes, the scent of a party in full swing. You would think this place had a full-time janitor, but honestly, they seem to be too busy picking up the pieces of this inevitable chaos. Word on the street, or should we say, the cobblestone, was that John could party harder than a village tavern on Saint's Day. His evenings were filled with fine wine, questionable guests, and certainly lots of snacks. Think of hors d'oeuvres made of things that, on a good day, you wouldn't even consider edible. You know, delightful choices like boiled rat and swarthy cheese that could clear a room faster than a bad joke at a wedding. It's like having a potluck where everyone brings utter chaos, but hey, who doesn't love a good food fight? And just when you think it couldn't get any more scandalous, imagine this. John was flitting around town, shaking hands with the very same nobles he was supposed to keep in check. Can you feel the tension? It's like being in a high-stakes game of poker, but with far more deceit and not nearly enough actual chips. You watch as coats of arms and shiny armor collide in the corridors, discussions intermittently punctuated with the sound of hiccuping laughter. It's as if a toddler with a love for mischief is suddenly running the candy store. Now, on to his less than conventional ecclesiastical decisions. Imagine him announcing, surprise, from now on, all the healing miracles will require a secret password, perhaps something fun like holy moly. Just envision the frantic lineups for miraculous healings, all with people coming clutching an array of ailments. I've got a cyst. I've chipped a tooth. What's the magic word again? And let's not skip the fact that this young pope somehow found time to indulge in some serious lovin', if you catch my drift. It's like if your local youth pastor were suddenly responsible for the entire moral compass of the community, but instead he decides to throw a dance party every night. Imagine the spiced whispers and exaggerated tales floating through the very corridors that were supposed to be filled with divine chit-chat. Did you hear about the Pope? Yeah, last night he turned the altar into a dance floor with, let's just say, preposterously questionable choices of companions. Eventually, the nobles grew tired of this unprecedented madness, the kind that even their mothers would consider unsuitable. Sort of like how your relatives react when you post a picture of you covered in mud from the last family reunion mudslide. And just when everyone thought John might just settle down and embrace the holy life, he became embroiled in scandal after scandal, proving that being Pope in 1215 was less about salvation and more about a raucous good time. And just like that, you begin to understand, the grandeur of the Vatican hides a youth fueled by too much freedom and too little accountability. Amidst the running jokes and snickers, you can't help but ponder the eternal question, what does it really mean to lead? Maybe nothing at all, as long as there's wine and a good reason to host an impromptu party. So drift off into dreamland, where every corner of your consciousness becomes a stage for the most ridiculous reenactments of history. Imagine what kind of chaos John XII might have dreamed up next, who knows? Maybe even the great pizza debate of 1216 might come into play. Sweet dreams, dear listener, as you slumber into the mildly interesting madness of history's finest shenanigans, whether it be medieval or modern. Life is undoubtedly an unpredictable comedy. Asterisk, asterisk. Chapter 10. The Vatican Goes Wild. Welcome to the sin bin. Asterisk, asterisk. You thought you had it bad, your roommate hogging the Wi-Fi. or the neighbor's cat glaring at you like you owe it money? Well, hold on to your dreams of civilized living, because we're about to enter a realm where papal authority mixes with more debauchery than a reality TV show reunion episode. We're stepping back into 1215, where the Vatican was the hottest and, let's be clear, the most questionable place in all of Rome. So, kick off those slippers, dim the lights, and grab a plushie. You're going to need your sleep buddy for this wild ride through history. Imagine strutting into the Lateran Palace, your senses bombarded by the sweet smell of incense tinged ever so slightly with something not so sacred. Perhaps last night's roasted peacock wings, or broken dreams of a holy life. You know, the usual late-night snack routine for the saints of law. Did you ever wonder how negotiations worked when everyone involved was a little tipsy and heavily clothed in ridiculously opulent garments? Sir, I propose we sign an edict after one more round of wine. Congratulations. You've just woken up in the Vatican, a palace transformed from a tranquil spiritual sanctum into a buzzing party venue where spiritual enlightenment takes a backseat to riotous laughter and dice rolling. Yes, anything goes here. All it takes is a sprinkle of papal permission and a hearty, why not? Now, let's set the scene. The gilded halls echo with laughter, and perhaps the occasional screams of nobles as they lose their bets. You can hear the shuffling of cards mingled with the sound of ballroom slippers gliding across polished floors. It's like a medieval prom, except instead of promises of everlasting love, these folks are discussing profound matters like, did I just gamble away the family estate? Or was it last night's chicken? I can't remember. Picture a gaggle of brightly dressed courtesans, their gowns swirling around them like miniature whirlwinds of extravagance, joking and giggling as they swirl goblets that may very well be topped with fine wine or communion juice. It's hard to tell at this hour. Snack trays overflow, not with elegant hors d'oeuvres, mind you, but with an array of questionable choices that would make your average medieval tavern's menu look Michelin-starred. Can you imagine being served a platter that somehow combines pickled fish, crusty bread, and something that resembles pudding but is definitely not pudding? Classic. But hold on, it gets better. Amidst this sacrilegious circus, you might catch sight of Pope John XII, a youthful figure sporting the royal papal garb, which frankly looks tailored more for a nightclub than for holy duties. He's mingling like a rock star, shaking hands with the kind of nobles that would make the Kardashians seem like wallflowers. Picture him leaning closer to one noble, whispering, "What's the latest gossip? Did you hear the one about the bishop who lost his mitre while chasing after a chicken? No? Well, sit down. This is going to get juicy." As you drift deeper into this dreamscape, you start to realize that John's papacy wasn't just about church matters. It was an exhilarating trial of keeping Mum's judgment at bay-level party. This isn't a holy man channeling divine wisdom, more like your cousin who, after a few too many drinks, suddenly starts quoting Shakespeare, but mixes it up with excerpts from a cooking show. To be or not to be, that's the question. And definitely, garlic will make the peasant dishes much better. Let's not forget his less than conventional management style. Want to cure a headache? Fear not, just follow the sound of the trumpets announcing miracle moments in the halls. But wait, what's that? You need a secret password to get a blessing. Yes, you guessed it. Holy Bolognese. True story. The more outlandish the story, better. Amidst the raucous festivities, the nobles plot their strategies not just for power, but to ensure they're seated at the best table during the next feasting extravaganza. Imagine them squabbling over cholesterol-laden platters of roast animals, all while your overly cheerful historian gives over-the-top commentary, drawing inspiration from past galas. There's a smoother rhythm to it, like comedic improvisation among serious dignitaries, except half the crowd has wine-soaked cheeks. Hey, can we raise a toast to the Pope, who seems to think papal means party time? Now, it's time to tap into the emotional turmoil simmering beneath the surface, laced with whiskey and charm. You see, John's reign was not just about licentiousness. It was rife with high stakes and scandal. Like your high school prom, where drama ran wild. But instead of prom dates sneaking kisses in the shadows, you have nobles sneaking away for clandestine deals behind tapestry-covered corners. Shh! Let's haggle over the library's book budget, but first, wine. So, as you approach the finale of this epic party, you begin to understand just how wild it was navigating the complicated relationships between spirituality and sin. You can't help but chuckle at the absurdity of it all. A papacy where virtues could easily turn into vices, and every "how they doin'" might just mean something a lot more scandalous. But if you think your weekends are unpredictable, try leading a holy church amidst gossip, capers, and waving wine goblets. And as you float off to sleep, remember, the chaos of the Vatican holds much gentler spirits than reality could offer, and perhaps you'll find yourself dreaming of medieval dance parties where even the most pious have a little something extra in their goblets. Sweet dreams, dear listener, as you settle into sleep, leaving behind the whirlwind of history, mischief, and perhaps imagining a game of who wore it best on the floor of ancient Rome. Asterisk asterisk. Chapter 11. Pope John XII's Sinful Soiree. Wine, winks, and wickedness. Asterisk asterisk. You ever walked into a party only to realize you've stepped into a historical soap opera? Well, take a trip back to 1215 and imagine a gathering that makes your wildest college parties look like a knitting circle. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Lateran Palace, where the Pope supposedly shepherds the flock, yet seems more focused on shepherding a lively horde of debauched nobles. This isn't just any papal retreat, it's a raucous slapstick episode of Keeping Up with the Cardinals. Picture this. You've just strolled past the lavish gilded arches, and the heavy aroma of incense combined with something more regrettable fills your senses. It's not so hard to imagine the Pope's bewildered attempts at holiness were often clouded by wine-induced haze and the most tantalizingly scandalous gossip. Ever wondered how many Hail Marys it takes to forget a bad decision? Well, at this soiree, it might just be a full bottle, or three. As you sidle further into this spectacle of hypocrisy, laughter erupts from a nearby card table. A group of nobles clad in velvets and embroidered silk are engaging in an intense game of dice. Only, the stakes aren't just money, it's family honor against dinner invitations the following week. I'll bet 2 roast swans and a bottle of your finest vintage that Lord Benedict can't dance the can-can. Bravo, oh brave soul. Have you ever risked a dinner invitation for simply wanting to see someone in a garish gold tunic kick it? Amidst the riotous cacophony, you spot none other than Pope John XII. He's not perched solemnly in a gilded chair, mind you. No, he's wading through the crowd, like a rock star appearing on stage minus the guitar, but with a goblet raised high enough to rival the imperial statue across town. Muscles tense. You can't help but feel a slight chill as he leans in conspiratorially, ever so delighted, to whisper amongst debauchery, "Did you hear the latest? A bishop lost a duel over a chicken. A chicken. Now, if only all mortals were free to brandish such merriment in the house of God. But here's where the party gets juicy, because it's not just the wine flowing like a meandering river, it's the whispers of scandal. Ever thought about what it'd be like to party with a pope whose idea of modesty involved a minor label change, not too much like scandalous, more like moderately inappropriate? In moments like these, it's hard to fathom how everything could spiral from a night of snaffling grapes and divine inspiration to, well, let's say, more carnal pursuits than catechisms. The courtesans twirl and whirl in colourful gowns, sending flutters of fabric and scent through the air, combining the floral grace of robust lavender with a hint of an unidentifiable grease. Have you ever been at a function where your outfit carried an air of mystery like, is that perfume or last week's chicken soup? In this case, it's definitely a bit of both. And just when you think you've reached the peak of this purgatorial spectacular, word spreads of John's calming technique for stress, glorious fortnightly feasts between solemn litanies, just your normal medieval therapy. Who needs existential reflection when you can gorge on spicy roast boar while contemplating whether a neighboring lord is plotting your downfall? You're allowed to pray while you chew, right? That's the beauty of multitasking. Ah, and there he is, our jovial Pope, mixing meanings amidst a huddle of intrigued faces. Someone wishes to barter for blessings or negotiate new church policies. Well, first, let's see how they manage to unlock that secret door marked papal privileges. Spoiler alert. Advanced techniques in juggling wine cups and sharing scandalous anecdotes works wonders. Then comes the moment where you truly risk it all you must. Swim in the turbulent waters of political intrigue, where every toast could potentially unlock not just a banquet promise, but a sketchy alliance that would make anyone outside the Vatican household quiver. Our Pope declares, "Let's toast to power, riches, and questionable decisions. Cheers. May our enemies be ever entwined in a web of intrigue and dunking broth." What exactly was in that wine? One sip, and suddenly you're in the deep end of seduction and secrets, swaying to a beat only those who have imbibed too freely can hear. Who knew that salvation could be found between songs of scandal and a heaping platter of roasted duck? Why wait for the next crusade when you could negotiate favorable terms over a smorgasbord of excess in your party's narrative? And just as the night draws to an absurdist close, reminiscent of a Monty Python sketch full of awkward stares, slippery floors, and drink cups carelessly spilling, remember this. While it might seem like the royal court runs on perils and pitiful ambitions, apparently, even in the dark corners of the vaulted ceiling, all are prone to the pitfalls of poor choices. Imagine the Pope of your dreams, leading a merry fandango, with each cardinal trying to pass off their terrible dance moves as traditional church choreography. As you nestle into your dreams, let the echoes of Pope John XII's raucous revelry fill your mind, a melody of history that dances with the absurdity of humanity's timeless need for laughter amidst chaos. Waking up tomorrow, you'll find solace in the fact that while your day may be slightly chaotic, it doesn't involve the noble pursuit of sin amidst the revelry of the Vatican. Sweet slumber awaits, dear listener, as the intriguing spectre of historical hilarity slips gently into your dreams. Asterisk, asterisk. Chapter 12. The Sinful Sanctuary of Pope John XII. Wine, women, and wacky decisions. Asterisk, asterisk. Now that we've set the scene for this delightfully chaotic party atmosphere, let's take a moment to really dig into the depths of decorum, or rather, the delightful absence of it. Welcome to the Lateran Palace in the year 1215, where walls that once echoed the solemn hymns of devotion now reverberate the shrill laughter and raucous shenanigans of a very different congregation. The air is thick with sweet incense, mingling vaguely with that unmistakable scent of careless indulgence. It's like trying to enjoy a fine wine while brushing your teeth with garlic, simultaneously intoxicating and strangely off-putting. Here, amidst ancient Roman arches, you find yourself nestled in a decadent corner of absurdity where modesty came to die and revelry reigned supreme. As you glance around the candlelit space, the flickering flames cast playful shadows that seem to dance along with the courtesans, who flaunt their sumptuous gowns lighter than a feather, with layers cascading like a waterfall over the bits of fried mead cakes and cheese puffs strewn about the floor. Honestly, you're half convinced that the floor itself has taken on a life of its own, perhaps trying to swallow any food particles for an impromptu late-night snack. As you hear a crashing clatter, a rogue knight tumbles across the floor, arms flailing like a tangle of spaghetti. I swear I was just retrieving my goblet, he bumbles with a sheepish smile, adjusting his tunic. Meanwhile, a gaggle of noble women cackle like crows and encourage him to take a bow or perhaps a roll. Ah, the majesty of medieval social graces. Now, let's talk about our friend, Pope John XII, the poster child for poor decisions and wild celebrations. One might think the head of the Catholic Church would be an austere figure, passing judgment with a steely gaze over pious congregants. But alas, Pope John has turned the Vatican's previously revered halls into something more akin to a circus tent, full of tantalizing spectacle, acrobatics of debauchery, and a not-so-holy amount of wine. If Michelangelo had painted this scene, the divine would become amusing, yet surprisingly relatable chaos. Consider this. Have you ever been thrown into a situation where every decision seemed increasingly ridiculous? Perhaps it was during your last work party, when Brenda from accounting convinced you to try an in-house escape room that turned out to be comprised of nothing but a locked supply cupboard filled with post-it notes and misplaced staplers. Imagine the antics the Pope must have been up to, convinced his party was somehow an interpretative rite of the church. Maybe he was just trying to merge Holy Communion with cocktail hour. With goblet in hand, our exuberant Pope declares, "Let us partake in the sin of merriment." For what is sin, if not a splendid excuse to overindulge? A chorus of laughter follows, possibly because everyone is either shocked by his impropriety or a little too tipsy to care. You pause to take in the surreal tableau. Half-naked nobles trying to juggle roasted fowl, peasants strumming harps badly in an attempt to serenade the crowd, and someone in the corner attempting to balance on a table. It's both a feast for the senses and a cautionary tale for anyone taking life or a party too seriously. Because, let's face it, if you can't let loose once in a while, what's the point? Now, let's make some comparisons that might hit close to home. Imagine your local grocery store had a wacky Wednesdays policy, where the manager bursts out wearing a jester's hat and throws confetti around while loudly announcing BOGO snacks. You either lean into it with laughter or look for the nearest exit. In a way, That's the kind of madness taking place here. How long before someone challenges the Pope to a chugging contest, claiming, "I can down this goblet faster than you can recite the Lord's Prayer." Ah, divine folly, wrapped in a rich tapestry of wine-splattered linens. As the night escalates, the combination of spiced meats, rich cheeses, and faces turned ruby red from laughter creates an atmosphere where anything can happen. Suddenly, an idea strikes the brain of the Pope. This would be an excellent time to proclaim a new vision. Let us build a new cathedral, paid for entirely with childish whimsy and my legendary charisma. Though no one really knows what he means, a short cheer erupts, just because everyone's having too much fun to stop. And just as the merry chatter is almost overwhelming, a gaggle of cardinals, clad in their finery, form a conga line led by Pope John himself, embracing diverse rivals from every corner of Europe, well, for better or worse. If history has taught us anything, it's that when wine is involved, even the most rancorous politics can transform into a bizarre dance routine that leaves more than just shoes sore the next day. Just as everything appears to be tumbling into chaos, the party, the politics, and history itself, a tremendous crashing noise erupts. Long story short, it's the church's prized chalice, now shattering on the floor as if to declare, "Let's be real, this is the most appropriate ending anyone could suggest for a night like this." Cheers erupt, laughter reigns. Perhaps chaos was indeed the best prayer the crowd could offer to the evening. So, dear listener, as you sink into slumber, pondering the sheer absurdity of it all, let the echoes of Pope John XII's famed escapade fill your dreams with bubbling laughter and tangled merriment. History may recall the details, but for tonight, it's merely about letting go, enjoying the ride, and recognizing that even the darkest corners of the past held the light of joy and hilarity, albeit cloaked in wine stains and questionable judgment. Rest easy, as you drift into dreams of festivities far grander and more entertaining than you might find at your next neighborhood gathering. Asterisk asterisk. Chapter 13. The Glittering Vices of Pope John XII. Simony and silliness. Asterisk asterisk. Now that we've unraveled the delightful chaos of the Lateran Palace, let's pivot to a particularly grotesque gem in our wild historical tale. Pope John XII's serious mismanagement of the Church's treasures. Imagine for a moment. There you are, perched at a cozy table strewn with mead, cake crumbs, and suddenly you realize the shiny golden chalice you were admiring isn't just bling, it's practically the Church's emergency fund. Talk about borrowing from the wrong piggy bank. Picture this, it's the early 1215 CE, and John XII, the head honcho of Catholicism, is throwing lavish festivals, while simultaneously converting the Church's riches into an elaborate game of chance. It's like if your local priest decided that bingo nights needed upgrades. Tonight, sacred relics will be our prizes. Oops. Spoiler alert. There are no takebacks when it comes to holy treasures. If riches could talk, these ones would scream, "Please don't roll me." As you wander through the candlelit aisles of this chaotic soiree, you can almost hear the lamentations of centuries-old monks. You've sold what? The golden goblet of street whatever, for a drunken night of debauchery. But alas, this was John's spiritual strategy: swap that divine chalice for a round of ale and a hearty laugh. Genius? Absolutely not. But it did make for some excellent shenanigans. You witnessed the bling-bling antics of the time. Wealth was no longer a means to holiness. No, it was a tool for splendor, a hungry diva demanding all the wrong kinds of attention. Church gold was being melted down for extravagant feasts. Heartfelt prayers were traded for gambling chips, and divine connections turned into clever transactions. If this had happened today, one could only imagine church offerings being used for a star-studded concert, or, worse, a surprise reality show called Keeping Up with the Papacy. Look out, Kardashians, here comes the Vatican. While John XII engages in his scandalous revelries, let's compare his excessive lifestyle to modern-day social media influencers. With an ever-present camera roll, they flaunt everything from exotic vacations to expensive outfits, living their best lives while you struggle to afford avocado toast. Look, I rented a yacht with church funds. Shout the historical posts that inexplicably challenge both theology and fiscal responsibility. You can hear a medieval crowd, collectively gasping and whispering, "Is this really what we signed up for?" But guess what? If you felt underwhelmed by your bank account, you could always blame it on the Pope's extravagant parties. Now, let's dive into the Holy Rollers poker game. John hosted, smoke rising, laughter echoing like a reality TV reunion gone comically awry. I raise you one relic of St. Peter and a pair of socks that once belonged to Mary. You wonder if anyone had the gall to ask, if I win, do I get a new cathedral? Blending the sacred with hilariously absurd, John was redefining church rituals in a way no one could have predicted. As the night spiraled further into hilarious oblivion, the Pope seized an opportunity of peak comedy. You can almost picture him standing on a table, wings of a hilarious costume loosely draped over his shoulders, one that made him look more like a glammed-up chicken than the Vicar of Christ. With goblet in hand, he proclaims in his finest booming voice, "Let us sin merrily, my friends. Sin is merely divine levity, after all." Amid this mess, where the wine flows like the Tiber during a storm, his words hang in the air, begging to inspire future generations of revelers and a few elves I've heard about. As the Candor roof threatens to collapse under the weight of awestruck nobles trying to juggle not too sober Olympic levels of food and drink, you can't help but laugh. Some adventurous soul attempts to balance a plate of roasted fowl on their head. Will they win a nobility award or end up the evening's biggest fool? Given the circumstances, one might think it's only a small step between a pie-eating contest and divine grace. Blame it on the Pope. You can't help but imagine a modern twist, where every time someone posts a lavish meal online, they inadvertently submit a new petition to their Instagram saint. "Oh divine influencer, grant me likes and carbs." Sadly, when the church's relics are turned into gamble stakes, one can only expect future bishops will be adding high-stakes poker to their headline acts. Now let's wind down this episode with a picture of chaos. Amid the giggles of noble women lost in revelry, the Pope is lost somewhere between inspiring karaoke and sermonizing on the wisdom of carpet tiles. Seriously, does he even know where he is? As the candlelight flickers dangerously low and the room echoes with laughter, let's leave our everyman Pope for now. After all, the history books aren't done jabbing at him. We can almost hear the future historians bemoaning, perhaps it's time we start sticking to mint sprigs instead of selling divine treasures. Yes, dear listener, as you prepare to float off into the safer waters of slumber, reflect on the bright, absurd folly of humanity where biblical treasures become party favors and judgment turns into jest on a grand stage. Within every misstep lies a nugget of laughter, a twinkling relic of joy trapped within time itself. Drift into dreams filled with historical snickers and soirees of grand absurdity, reveling in the paradox that even the most sacred spaces have at least a hint of delightful chaos and humor. Rest easy, and dream of a past where folly ran rampant, and every party could emerge from the flames of history blooming new frivolities. Asterisk asterisk, Chapter 14. Pope John XII, The Hunt for Heaven's Lost Baggage. Asterisk asterisk, hey guys, grab your sleep masks and settle in. Tonight, we embark on a journey more tangled than your headphones after they've spent a day in your pocket. Picture this. It's the early 1215 CE, and we are about to meet a pope who was less of a spiritual leader and more of a medieval party animal. Yes, we're diving into the bizarre life of Pope John XII, who had a proclivity for hunting and feasting that would make Bacchus raise an eyebrow. But before we gallivant through the frenzied past, make sure to like, subscribe, and drop a comment, only if you actually enjoy this wild ride through history, of course. No pressure, really. Now, dim those lights, put on your fan, and prepare for a few odd thoughts. Ever pondered what it's like to ride a horse for sport, while dressed like a human peacock? Or how about hosting a lavish feast where instead of a menu selection, it's more of an "is it holy enough to eat" type of motivation? Or even if you could trade a relic of the saints for a pint of ale, would you do it? Congratulations, you've just woken up in 1215 CE, when the church was less about divine intervention and more about divine indulgence. Let's gallop into the mischief of Pope John XII, where spirituality took a back seat, and the thrill of the hunt was all the rage. Now imagine this. You step outside into a lavish courtyard filled with nobles, dressed in fine silk, who just seem to glimmer too much for my comfort. But wait, instead of seeing a traditional pope leading prayers, you spot John XII, adorned in rich hunting attire like he's just swooped down from a Renaissance runway. It's less Vicar of Christ, and more primo hunting fashionista. This is a man who has forgotten that he's supposed to be saving souls, not chasing deer. And, if that's not wild enough, he's got a power horse that looks as eager as a kid in a candy store. As you watch him mount this majestic steed, you can almost hear the creaking of his lavish cloak that's bedecked with jewels. because who needs humility when you can have custom tailors? The proverbial wind in his hair might as well be the spirits of countless saints rolling their eyes. And there he goes, racing through the countryside as if he's late for a divine picnic. You ponder, what execs were in charge of the church's schedule during this time? Were they like, hey, let's swap sacred ceremonies for hunting season? Sounds like a divine plan. In this peculiar historical moment, laughter mingles in the air, interspersed with the soft thud of hooves against the earthy ground. With each rustle of his horse's mane as it gallops about, the local wildlife seems slightly offended. Do you mind? We were here first. Dear listener, it's almost as if you can hear a small squirrel shouting, "What happened to my acorn harvest?" No respect for the natural order when you've got a Pope galloping along, pursuing wildlife with the fervor of a competitive squirrel. After disseminating a few playful orders to his hunting companions, it's as if John bristles with an energy akin to that of a kid at a birthday party, complete with cake, balloons, and, presumably, a clergy banishment for anyone who dares mess up the gift bags. Each arrow let loose in pursuit of the fleeing prey seems less about survival and more of a chaotic scavenger hunt, massively misunderstood. What's next, Pope John? A throttled wild boar replaced with a divine-covered pizza? You ponder. Suddenly, the once sacred hills transform into this shifting stage for a medieval wild game show. You half expect John to shout, "Tune in next week for Hunting with the Holy," as if this were some bizarre cross-promotional event with the Vatican. But wait, all is not just wild gallivanting and laughter. As night falls, we venture into the unexpected extravagance that awaited these hunt-loving nobles. Feast tables groan under the weight of fowl roasting, wine bubbling like it's somehow channeling ancient drownings of gluttony. Imagine a banquet where the menu reads like a medieval version of Top Chef. Only the main ingredient is excess. Feasting and drinking among the jesting crowds. Dear listener, many would wager their livelihoods, not for the proverbial golden chalice, but for a chance to be part of John's ridiculous escapades. Do we really want to beg for mercy when the Pope appears like a flamboyant big game hunter with the subtlety of a raccoon at a trash can, tasting meats more roasted than any Baptist choir could handle? One can almost hear the chorus of nobles bickering, who had the brainwave to serve a whole roasted swan. And lo and behold, as plates are cleared and laughter rises like a sun-soaked morning, a game of dice emerges involving stake bets that put the value of holy relics in the back pocket. Is this ethically permissible? You can almost hear a confused monk whispering, "My Holy Communion could have been that relic." To which the answer, we all know now, is absolutely not. But, in the glamorous twilight of this medieval madness, who pays that any mind when John's Lionheart stole the show? And as the evening fades, you become acutely aware that humor and absurdity are firmly entrenched in the fabric of history. So, sweet dreamers, as slumber beckons you into its embrace, let's celebrate the quirks of those who traded divine rigor for the thrill of the feast, where saints slipped into oblivion and hunted shoes were somehow divine relics, waiting to make their mark on history. Rest easy, and may your dreams be filled with swans, sacred relics, and the hilarity of past follies, where every moment glimmers with the questions of what on earth is happening. Asterisk, asterisk, Chapter 15, Otto Vi, and the quest for Pope deposing glory, asterisk, asterisk. Hey guys. Welcome back to another captivating historical slumber party. Tonight's theme is kings who definitely should have stayed in bed. Settle in, snug as a bug in a rug made of slightly irritating straw. Trust me, it gets worse. Imagine dismounting your metaphorical time travel horse in the year 1215. And by dismounting, I mean you're suddenly staring at a very angry Holy Roman Emperor named Otto I. It's like waking up to find that your alarm clock is actually a medieval overlord who's just realized the Pope isn't quite fitting the bill. Now, try to picture Otto in his regal garb, looking as stern as your high school principal when someone accidentally set his tie on fire during an ill-fated chemistry experiment. Grab your imaginary medieval quill, because we're about to scribble down a few thoughts. Ever wondered how stressful it must be to have holy in your job title, while also juggling politics, religion, and the general idea of, reigning over an empire? Like trying to balance an iced latte on your head while doing yoga in a windstorm. Or how about being in charge of an army, trying to keep your soldiers from goofing off while you're busy planning your next big move against a pope who'd rather have a banquet than a serious conversation? Because man, are these guys about to throw down. Picture it. Otto's palace, bursting with soldiers more organized than a Pinterest board focused on medieval warfare. The air buzzes with the smell of armor, polish, and anticipation. You can almost hear Otto intoning over his goblet. Listen up, everyone. We've got a theological conundrum on our hands, and frankly, the Pope is about as trustworthy as a vegan serving steak at a barbecue. Those assembled soldiers, buff and a tad overly eager, are probably more interested in vigorous sword practice than deeper philosophy. They're clanking around like a bunch of over-caffeinated squirrels, eager to fight for Emperor Otto, who stands there, resolute, plotting his move. Men, we're off to Rome, to depose the scandalous Pope John XII. Grab your nunchucks, and let's head out. What a sight! A battalion roaring like an enthusiastic sports team, complete with pom-poms made of swords. As Otto surveys his unified forces, he's struck by a nagging thought. Am I the only one who finds it odd that we're marching to overthrow a man who's supposed to lead the church, but who's currently more interested in hunting boar and throwing extravagant feasts? Just then, he imagines a boar in a pope hat, weaving its way through rows of soldiers, and he can't help but chuckle. The image is ridiculous enough to ease the tension in the ranks. If worship isn't about enjoying oneself, then what is? You're transported to the moment they begin to march, the rhythm of heavy boots echoing like a medieval dance track playing slightly offbeat. Dust rises from the ground with every step, swirling around them like a playful ghost. The sun casts long shadows, giving the entire procession an inadvertent flair of drama like a movie montage where the hero feels the weight of the world, except here, it's more about the urgent need for a suitable pope. With what feels like comedic timing, they arrive at the gates of Rome, which now stand before them like a mouth of a cave, suspiciously waiting to see what morsels will venture inside. Otto stands tall and declares, "Let there be order, and let the feathers fly." Pope John, you're never going to guess what we brought. The soldiers cheer, an overlap of confusion, bloodlust, and the inevitable feeling of being late for dinner. It's the medieval equivalent of running a marathon and realizing you've just sprinted into the wrong building. Now, let's dive into the absurdity of the times. Otto's entourage proves less susceptible to the everyday worries of contemporary life. Forget caring about online shopping carts or managing your weekend plans. No, here, priorities are simpler. It's either overthrow the Pope or make bad decisions under pressure. Just wait until they flail through negotiations, conversations more awkward than asking your boss for a raise in front of the coffee machine while he spills hot Java down the front of his shirt. As Otto prepares his demands, you might find yourself chuckling at the ridiculousness of their protocol. "Excuse me, Your Grace, may I inquire how you take your coffee? Also, do you prefer banquets or, I don't know, a swift deposition at dawn?" At the same time, life outside the grandiosity of the palace seems utterly chaotic. The commoners shuffle about, scurrying like confused ants, trying to figure out if they should carry on with their lives or flee from medieval drama. You can almost see one farmer in the background, shaking his head and muttering, "I just wanted a quiet day with my cows, not a papal Q&A gone rogue." And here we are, immersed in this collision of ambitions and absurdities, where Otto I embarks on his noble crusade, leaving you wondering if modern conflicts were simpler, by contrast, involving too much avocado toast debate and just the right amount of angry tweets. So roll over, sweet dreamers, and remember that, although you may not have to contend with a holy emperor trying to dethrone a poppin' pope, you're still navigating life's historical oddities. Rest easy in the knowledge that the past, for all its madness, gives us plenty to ponder and even more to chuckle about in our deeply sleepy state. *** Chapter 16. Pope John XII and the Battle for Vatican Quarters ***. Hey guys. Welcome back to another utterly engaging sleep series, where we dive into the thrilling world of history with all the enthusiasm of a dog chasing its tail in a room full of mirrors. Tonight's installment features a cast of characters you definitely wouldn't want to invite to your next dinner party. Kings who definitely should have stayed in bed. So, buckle your medieval belts and get cozy, because this is about to get as unpredictable as a cat with a laser pointer. Let's crank up the absurdity machine, shall we? Imagine, if you will, waking up in the year 1215 CE while feeling more confused than a chicken at a physics lecture. You stretch your arms, only to realize you're not in your comfortable, overstuffed bed but rather on a pile of hay in the midst of a heated war for the Vatican. I mean, who doesn't love a little morning chaos with their coffee? Now, how many of you have imagined battling over a prime piece of real estate. Perhaps you've had a spat with a neighbor over a fence post or fought for bathroom access during a family road trip. But have you ever grappled with the idea of a pope who's more interested in dogfighting than divine duty? Well, that brings us to our man of the hour, Pope John XII. He's the kind of guy who'd host more late-night bashes than an over-caffeinated college student, and boy, does it come back to bite him. Are you picturing John with one half-empty goblet in one hand and a piece of roast pig in the other, mid-epic showdown with an equally unamused Emperor Otto? Quite the scene, huh? Imagine Otto leading an army of warriors with the determination of an under-caffeinated parent at a child's birthday party, ready to take on a man who would presumably prioritize pasta over piety. The day-to-day challenges of running a country resemble a bad remake of a reality show, titled Battle for Vatican Living Quarters Complete, with dramatic close-ups and theme music straight out of a horror movie. The setting is chaotic, as the very air vibrates with anticipation. The brass of trumpets sounds off, and you can practically taste the tension like burning your tongue on hot soup at the precise moment you attempt to take a sip. The gates of the Vatican loom ahead, and you can almost hear the stone walls chuckling in a deep, gravelly voice. You think you can just waltz in here and claim the Holy See like it's a hot piece of real estate. Good luck with that. But let's not get too far ahead. We're talking about John XII here, a fellow who once made the remarkable decision to name a horse as a consul while reclining on a throne surrounded by revelers. Yep, you heard that right. And you thought your Zoom calls were awkward. The Pope was more hip than your last high school reunion, throwing raucous banquets and probably planning wild festivities in between scheming ways to keep his position and act more difficult than balancing on a seesaw with a sack of potatoes. But back to his predicament, where the smell of iron and sweat fills the air as Otto's forces arrive. Just imagine the unsuccessful attempt at diplomacy. Your Holiness, might I suggest we all sit down for some tea and discuss how you really shouldn't have declared victory in the game of life? Because let's be real, nobody's here for brunch and casual chit-chat when swords are drawn and volleyed with the precision of an enraged flock of geese. And while you're pondering over the absurdity of this, try to visualize Otto. His thick armor clinks as he strides forward, ready to show John what happens when you throw divine responsibilities to the wind. The tension in the air is electric, less like a relaxed dinner and more like a surprise fire drill at your worst family gathering. Now, picture Pope John, half-heartedly attempting to rally his tired soldiers, maybe even using pizza as a battle. Standard after all, it's 1215, who's counting calories? Guys, I promise, if we win this battle, there will be endless feasting. His voice echoes, and you can hear the rhythmic clanging as swords and shields clash outside. A soundtrack that would make even the most dedicated battle reenactor weep with nostalgia. Simultaneously, deep down, you have to wonder, is it really worth fighting over the control of the Vatican? Is the wine really that good? Wouldn't it be easier just to let the Emperor have a seat at the head of the dinner table and call it a day? Hey, Otto, you seem to have a thing for power. How about a wine tasting instead? I promise it's far less bloody, John might quip, desperately trying to defuse the situation. With soldiers feeling charged up and raucous laughter echoing in the background, it's like the worst version of a flash mob turned battlefield, each participant swearing that they didn't sign up for this chaos. A swirl of dust rises, and the air feels thick enough to cut, as if a baking exam might occur right in the middle of a sword fight. And, as this twisted drama unfolds, one can only shake their head in disbelief. Who knew the papacy would be host to such disorganization? Well, buckle up, because nothing wraps up this absurd adventure quite like discovering the consequences of grabbing victory by the collar and essentially shoving reality off a cliff. So, my sleepy friends, as you fade into dreamland, hold on to the hilarity of an era marked not just by battles for land and titles, but by the ludicrous antics of historical figures who, quite frankly, could have done with a little more sleep. Such is the tapestry of medieval life, where even the most powerful people often find themselves tangled in absurdity that, thankfully, is only a dream away. Rest easy, but just as history shocked us, adventure awaits in your dreams. Asterisk asterisk. Chapter 17. The mysterious demise of Pope John XII asterisk asterisk. Ah, the world of popes, an illustrious fraternity where high hats meet low lows, and the drama unfolds with all the subtlety of an elephant on roller skates. Simply put, when we think of the papacy, we picture holy relics, serene prayers, and sometimes an unexpected, untimely demise that involves scandal, intrigue, and perhaps a bit of divine retribution, or just a really aggressive case of food poisoning. Strap in as we take a ride on the absurdity train, making our first stop at one especially notorious figure, Pope John XII. Picture yourself waking up in the year 964, amidst a swirl of incense, and yes, an alarming amount of feasting that could put any modern buffet to shame. You open your eyes to find a veritable carnival of chaos. Candles flicker like fireflies in an existential crisis, each carrying the rich aroma of burning wax and questionable decisions. It's not even 9 a.m. Yet the Vatican resembles a Wild West saloon post-fight, with leftover confetti from last night's raucous festivities littering the stone floor. Now, one might wonder, what kind of party invites a pope? Well, let's just say John XII knew how to liven things up. With a reputation for scandalous behavior that would make even the most adventurous college students roll their eyes, this pope wasn't just after the soul, he was after the soiree. He indulged in gambling, hunting, and would frequently justify his evening revelries with phrases like, "What would Jesus do?" Probably call a few friends over for poker. Divine light feels a bit different when you throw a rager, huh? But let's take a moment and picture our dear Holy Father, perhaps lounging in a bejeweled robe that could only be described as sprightly. His hair improbably luxurious for a man of the cloth bounces a bit like he's just won a hair commercial audition. While you're in the depths of this historical haze, try to imagine the sound of laughter intertwining with the faintest echo of an organ, more akin to a cat stepping atop a piano than a solemn tune. Can you hear it? That's the sound of hilarity mixed with impending doom. Of course, isn't it every pope's dream to have their story told in whispers spanning centuries? Except John's tale took a decidedly dark turn, steeped in both bathos and a dash of carnal intrigue. In this ungodly mix of debauchery, we come to that fateful night, a night punctuated by a sudden, scandalous end. John's reign had been like a soap opera episode, but just when you think they've finally caught a break. Plot twist. This wasn't the to be continued most had hoped for. So, what exactly transpired? Picture it amidst a particularly boisterous banquet, where the wine flowed faster than thoughts of Calvin ball rules in a college dorm. Pope John XIII expired. The official story was a delightful mix of theories, from a heart attack brought on by excessive revelry to, naturally, the lurking possibility of divine intervention. But whispers echoed through the hallowed halls. Since John had spent so much time redefining what papal behavior meant, think ardent mock battles with papal hats as helmets, it's no stretch to think that someone may have taken it upon themselves to call an end to the Pope's relentless party planning. Now, imagine the scene. One moment you're knee-deep in cheese, engaging in the philosophical discourse on whether the last piece of bread is still sharing if it's claimed by the most gluttonous at the table, and the next, your buddy's gone from booming laughter to snoring like a bear in a haystack. This was not the post-victory nap anyone anticipated. Between snickers and raised eyebrows, a cacophony of concern arose. Dashing out of the hall, officials struggled to come to terms with the screeching reality that their Pope's chair now resembled a monument of negligence, devoid of the sour king who once held, caught like a drunken king on a roller coaster. The whispers perhaps grew louder, a curious inquiry into whether certain boys under the table were only building their social allegiances or engaging in some morally questionable conspiracy. After all, people often forget that conspiracy theories weren't just for the B-list drama queen in the village. The unfortunate demise occurred amid such incredible night terrors involving playful, gladiatorial-style games with pious overtones woven through like an ancestor's knitting club, gone horribly wrong. As the news of John's unexpected and ambiguous departure settled over the Vatican like a heavy wool cloak in July, countless theories emerged. Was it a rival's work, divine retribution for his cavalier spirit, or customs gone amiss? The rumors ricocheted around the narrow cobblestone streets, as if the townsfolk believed they might overhear their cat newspaper boy gossiping outside a snug tavern, each tale growing more extravagant, with the weight of imagination. It's an all-too-familiar reality that sometimes scandal outlives the scandalous. Many thought John's demise a suitable end for his wildly unholy hours reign, a raucous finale to a movie that didn't know when to stop the ludicrous chaos. Roughly put, when your tenure includes naming a horse a consulate, perhaps your legacy speaks for itself. So, as you slip into a slumber tonight, let yourself drift away, knowing that even in the realm of kings, popery, and slightly errant quests for glory, the hum of historical absurdity continues to linger like a forgotten crumb on the grand table of time. Sleep well, dear dreamer, for the world is far more scandalous than a clumsy musical number at a medieval banquet revamp. Asterisk asterisk chapter 18. The Lonely Boy in the Castle. Asterisk asterisk. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of mildly interesting history for sleep, where tonight we dive deeper than a soggy piece of bread into the absurdities of the past. Buckle up, because we're about to meet a young princeling named John, a boy so overlooked, you'd think he was the unpopular cousin at a family gathering, where everyone else is bragging about their medal in the War of Glorious Riches. Before we begin, I invite you to like, subscribe, and comment only if you enjoy it, of course. Trust me, my heart won't shatter like a bad medieval window if you don't. So, dim the lights, turn on a fan that sounds like an aging knight's last breath, and snuggle into your pillows like you're trying to escape a muddy battlefield. Now, have you ever felt like the other sibling? You know, the one who didn't quite make it to the A honor roll while your brother's out slaying dragons and winning hearts. Ever wondered how it would feel to be the kid in a family where the only thing less impressive than your achievements is your ability to differentiate between a carrot and a turnip? Well, congratulations, you're about to experience life in the year 1215, right in the grand halls of the Plantagenet dynasty. So, without further ado, let's watch young Prince John's journey unfold. Imagine you've just awoken in a castle that seems to be a permanent installation of a bizarre "who will take out the trash" competition. The fragrant aroma of unwashed linens and slightly rancid meats wafts through the halls as mysterious echoes float through the air. Somewhere, a goat bleats its noise somehow less dignified than anything you've ever managed to produce at a fancy dinner party. Over here, when you wander the grand rooms, you might catch sight of young John, the spitting image of despair, mixed with the low expectations typically reserved for overripe fruit. Picture him standing, awkwardly clutching a wooden sword that, let's be real, probably doubled as a wobbly table leg back home. You might wonder what goes through his mind. Perhaps he's thinking about dinner, or daydreaming about how to convince his parents that being a historian is a valid career choice. Spoiler alert, it's not, if you live in a castle where conquering lands is the primary pastime. You greet the morning with muted optimism. The sun peeks through the windows, only to reveal a lovely view of a muddy courtyard filled with, well, more mud and disgruntled peasants. Can you hear that? The sound of reality crashing down like a badly constructed wooden beam, a reminder that the king is literally just a tough-sounding title for a glorified interior decorator with control over a horse or two. As you meander through the halls, the scent of porridge lingers. Porridge is the culinary masterpiece of the day. It's like oatmeal, only, if possible, even more bland and likelier to invoke nostalgia for those questionable cafeteria days. You can almost imagine the chefs arguing over whether they should add a pinch of salt, only to realize they've run out and promptly redecided that plain old mush is always the preferable option. Ah, the depths of medieval cuisine, where even a simple bowl of food could feel like a cruel joke. As you watch young John interact with his siblings, let's call them Richard the Lionheart, and Geoffrey, the marginally important, you can't help but feel the weight of his perpetual overshadowing. Richard, gleaming with accolades, parades around talking about his latest conquests, while all John can do is quietly wonder if it's possible to be outshined by the mustard jar sitting on the table. You can almost hear him thinking, do I even have to try? I mean, my brothers are clearly winning at life, while I'm over here, contemplating as life's biggest spectator. In this castle of cheerful backstabbing and heightened sibling rivalry, efforts toward affection often morph into bizarre contests. The siblings might treat the family meals like chess matches, each seeking to outwit the others with impressive displays of boisterous laughter or ridiculous stories filled with glory, only punctuated by critical side-eyes questioning John's very existence. Campaigning for affection bestowed by seemingly indifferent kin, just imagine. It's like being stuck somewhere between a failed circus act and a public speaking event with all your punchlines lost to the winds of time. Not the best position to be, especially when medieval scorn comes wrapped in leather armor and a diabolical grin. And as you try to fall asleep tonight, imagine the soothing sounds of distant trumpet calls, the occasional clatter of armor, and John's inner monologue muttering to himself, maybe I'll pick up juggling next week. You know, just a simple way to join the spotlight. At least if he ever learns to catch a ball without falling flat on his face. Ah, history, it's filled with outrageous tales of ambition, delusions of grandeur, and dedicated follow-ups. And while you swirl through the intricacies of the Plantagenet family saga, let the knowledge that life, even in the grandest of castles, often comes down to the basic human need for love, acceptance, and, quite honestly, the ability not to trip over one's own cloak. Sleep tight, dear dreamer, as we continue to unveil the truly absurd chapters of history that come packaged with a side of humor. Asterisk asterisk, Chapter 19, King John's Dismal Dilemma, asterisk asterisk. Hey guys, welcome back. Tonight, we take a sojourn into a year even more fraught with drama than your aunt's last Thanksgiving dinner 1215 CE, to be exact. This year was loaded with more betrayals and cringe-worthy decisions than a prime-time soap opera. Imagine a stage where the actors are medieval kings, decision-makers dressed in woolly cloaks and adorned with crowns that seem to have been fashioned by a blacksmith who clearly skipped every art class. But, wait. I invite you to like, subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments section, only if you're feeling generous and not dragging yourself through life like a sad medieval mule. Of course. So, dim the lights, turn on that fan that sounds like a medieval catapult, clunky yet oddly comforting, and nestle into your blankets. You're in for a snooze, as we explore the completely relatable existential crises of one particularly unfortunate monarch. Have you ever found yourself staring blankly at an email from your boss, wondering just how you managed to become a mere pawn in someone else's game? Or found yourself losing a game of Monopoly, only to watch your fiery cousins plot your demise in a parental suggestion of teaming up against you? Ever felt that sinking feeling of knowing you're the least popular kid in a school, meant for social climbing? Bravo. You're perfectly positioned to empathize with our protagonist, King John, also known as Lackland, a man so often overshadowed, you'd think he was standing under the world's largest umbrella. Congratulations. You've just woken up in 1215, with the sun peering unenthusiastically through your dusty castle windows, casting a pallor that feels fitting for a man who just lost a significant chunk of territory to a group of French nobles who were probably seated at the How to Beat John in the game of Acquire More Land committee. Yes, that's right. You're in England, standing on the edge of a powerful tantrum involving the English Channel and a reckless obsession with ancestral lands. Picture this. As you shuffle to the window, the sound of the relentless waves crashing against the cliffs below feels like nature's version of a dramatic exclamation point, the perfect backdrop for your impending doom. The air, it reeks of dampness, mixed with a hint of salt and a generous dash of regret. What a lovely ensemble. You can almost feel the goosebumps as John gazes down at the turbulent waters, contemplating if the sea can swallow his sorrows. Spoiler alert, it cannot. Now let's take a moment to visualize King John. He stands there, looking very much like a child, caught with a hand in the cookie jar, but way worse off, because he just lost his cookie factory to the French. Clad in a tunic that's probably as flattering as a potato sack at a high society ball, he wrings his hands nervously, contemplating his life choices. Should he have groomed those relationships with the nobles just a tad more? Maybe a little less, my way or the highway, and a bit more let's sit around a fire and share our feelings. The pressures of kingship weigh on him like an overly friendly raven that just won't budge. Picture him musing aloud. If only I'd offered to share last week's mutton feast instead of guilting them into joining the knights who don't share food. Ah, regret an old friend, befriending King John with every passing moment. But wait a second. Just when you think things can't get worse, the winds of fate decide to sprinkle a dose of sheer abysmal absurdity all over John's day. You know, it's not enough to lose a chunk of Normandy. Oh no, that would just be too easy. He's also got pesky barons plotting discontent like they're on some kind of medieval version of a reality show titled The True Kings of Discontent. Nothing says fun like your closest allies questioning your fitness to rule while you still have a scone crumb lodged in your beard from breakfast. You can almost hear their whispers wafting through the castle halls. Perhaps a ruler who couldn't even conquer basic pastry maintenance might not be fit to govern us. Oh, the gossip of the medieval court travels swiftly, like rumor amongst teenage girls, devastatingly effective and borderline brutal. So, let's shift our focus back to King John as he gallantly prepares for a meeting with all the disgruntled nobles who are about as excited to see him as one would be about a root canal. Watching him fumble through his conversations must have felt like witnessing a shipwreck in slow motion. I swear I meant to pay you all in gold, but here we are with where did I even put that ledger? The tension could cut through the thick castle air, like an overcooked piece of meat. As our hapless king continues to stand at the edge of his kingdom, he can't help but think, what will it take to keep my throne? Maybe a fun idea like, let's collectively agree on a new Magna Carta doesn't sound so crazy after all. Yes, dear listener, as John's ideas unfold, we're destined to tread further into this wild ride where kingdoms may fall, but at least we're guaranteed a few belly laughs along the way. And as you settle down for the evening, let the waves of absurdity lap at your mind like a calming lullaby, soothing away the weights of your daily life and transporting you back to an era where kingship was just a really fancy way of saying, please, enjoy my reign while I trip over my royal robes. Sleep tight as we prepare to unravel more hilarious escapades of our unlikely monarch. Asterisk, asterisk. Chapter 20. Tax Collectors and Tattered Dreams, asterisk, asterisk. Welcome back, dear listener. As we dive further into the whims and woes of 1215, let's explore a scene more dismal than the last single you played on repeat. Picture an English village, nestled clumsily in the folds of green hills and grey skies, where the peasants, the valiantly bedraggled backbone of this kingdom, are gazing up at King John's tax collectors with expressions akin to that of a moth beholding a flame. The air is heavy, not just with the scent of wet earth and a faint whiff of sheep, but with a palpable despair that could only be rivaled by the last slice of cake disappearing at a family wedding. You see, these tax collectors aren't your typical friendly neighborhood mailmen. No, these well-fed, cloaked figures look more like the grim reapers of financial stability, riding around on horses that may or may not have once belonged to a more important and less horrified individual. As you turn your gaze to the villagers, you can almost hear the creaking of their dreams, loud and sorrowful, like an old cart full of broken promises. Peasant life here is less growing old together, and more aging like a loaf of stale bread. You ask yourself, did they ever think their lives would end up like this? Staring hopelessly at a procession of tax collectors instead of enjoying a pint of ale in a cozy tavern. The villagers are huddled closely together, their garments a patchwork of rags that would give a modern thrift shop a run for its money. But instead of finding fashion inspiration, they're lamenting the latest round of tax hikes, an arrangement so generous it could only be motivated by pure villainy, or even the spirit of a particularly spiteful tax bureaucrat in existence. Contemplating their misfortunes, you can't help but think how this scene mirrors your last trip to the DMV, where you were left pondering life's greatest questions as you gazed upon the number that seemed to taunt you from the wall like some cruel cosmic prank. And speaking of cruel, rumor has it that King John's motto was, "If it pleases me, it should hurt you." Nothing encapsulates this quite like a brisk morning stroll down to your local tax collection station, only to find your dwindling wages being shredded into the kingdom's proverbial paper shredder. Taxes on land, taxes on livestock, and taxes on absolutely anything you could grasp, perhaps a tax on the very air you breathe next. Beneath their breath, the peasants begin exchanging frustrated glances and whispers, plotting their next move as if they're about to surmount some grand heist operation. Freedom from King John's sorrowful shenanigans. But alas, these aren't the dashing Robin Hoods of folklore. These are beleaguered farmers lacking both skill and the confidence to take on their overgrown adversaries with any semblance of strategy. Does he really need this much gold? A peasant might mutter, aggrieved, as he scratches a lingering itch from the last bug bite he received during his less than inviting romp through the fields. I mean, what's he doing? Buying more horses to trot around, looking like he's conquered the entire continent. Meanwhile, I'm trying to figure out how to keep my turnips from becoming a pest buffet. However, on this unforgiving day, the atmosphere shifts. Suddenly, one brave soul, emboldened perhaps by too much stale ale or perhaps a fleeting moment of optimistic madness, raises his voice. "Why should we put up with this?" he calls out, virtually shaking his proverbial fist at fate. A chorus of murmurs erupts in agreement, like a wave of soggy bread that is, at best, reluctant to rise. But before fevered clamors can spiral into an all-out rebellion, a tax collector barks orders to silence them. "Back in line, peasants," he bellows, sounding a little too much like your childhood principal on a bad hair day. The villagers make way for him, rolling their eyes and muttering curses that echo through the narrow alleyways as they shuffle back into their demoralized ranks. It's a display so painfully relatable that it could be a real-life dramatization in a cozy sitcom of modern life. Just swap the horse for a 9-to-5 office drone lamenting on a Monday morning. With heads hung low, the peasants trudge back to their thatched homes, each step feeling like a mockery of the grind of everyday life. One can almost picture them collapsing into their meager beds at day's end, where a night's sleep is worth more than gold, though it might lay equally alongside the stench of sweat and livestock. Each night, as dreams of prosperity and land ownership mingle with visions of King John partying like a rock star, his newfound gold only extending his already overinflated ego, our villagers are left waiting for change, murmuring prayers that resonate as they sink deeper into a world where the only constant is the imposition of more taxes. And so, drifting off to sleep, just remember, the hurdles of peasantry might seem a tad grim, but at least they're a reminder to wake up in your own comfy bed, wishing the troubles of the day's trials could be solved with a mere flick of your scroll wheel or a thumbs up emoji. As you nestle into your own cocoon of woolly blankets, think about the real costs of our world today and know that in 1215, there were people trying to survive the kind of chaos that feels oddly similar to that pressing deadline at work. Sweet dreams, you've earned them. Asterisk, asterisk. Chapter 21, King John's Tantrums. A royal rumble of rage, asterisk, asterisk. Hey guys, welcome back. Tonight, we're about to dive into something so scarily relatable that even your cat might raise an eyebrow in judgment from its plush throne. That's right, we're taking a leisurely stroll through the tempestuous mind of King John who, if we're being honest, could give any drama queen on social media a run for their money. Now, just picture it, you're at work, and your boss, who is having a day worse than your last bad haircut, unleashes a storm of insults and demands upon the poor, cowering staff. You know, those moments when you're just trying to survive the 3 p.m. slump while all hell breaks loose. It's like trying to assemble IKEA furniture while your toddler is having a meltdown. So, if you're comfy and cozy, perhaps nestled under your softest blanket, like a burrito filled with dark chocolate, or at least wishing you were, let's dive into the chaotic life of a king, whose temper tantrums would put the fiercest toddlers to shame. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and maybe leave a comment only if you find this hilariously enlightening, of course. Congratulations. You've just woken up in 1215 CE, in a kingdom run by none other than the infamous King John of England. Yes, that's right. You're now the hapless subject of a ruler whose hot-headedness could power an entire medieval festival with its sheer intensity. It's like waking up in a sitcom where no one calls cut, and the laugh track broke down somewhere between your tax receipts and his latest over-the-top decree. Let's talk about your morning ritual in this chaotic court. You're standing there, a lowly courtier, while King John paces back and forth like a cat who has accidentally caught the Christmas ball of yarn but can't decide on which end to start unraveling first. He's fuming. You can practically smell the smoke rising from his royal head like the hot breath of a dragon. And is it just you? Or does he seem slightly sweaty? Each heavy thud of his boots against the polished stone echoes through the hall like the universe's most dramatic door slam. And what's going on inside his mind? You wonder, is King John plotting a fair tax system, planning a nice vacation to the coast? Nope. He's crafting the most creative insults you didn't know you could hear before lunch. How dare you look at me during court? He roars, pointing violently at a nearby noble like they're auditioning for a role in a, well, very bad Shakespearean tragedy. You're about as useful as a knitting needle in a blacksmith's forge. It's almost impressive how he swings from rage to absurd ridicule. The man clearly has a talent for making everyone feel like a lesser version of themselves. The staff, oh, bless their anxious little hearts. They scuttle around like frightened mice, trying to avoid the fallout of despair raining down from his fury. Perhaps we can put him in charge of the royal snacks, they whisper to each other. Certainly seems like he has enough rage built up to crush them into powder. But here's the kicker, every time he storms into a rant, accidentally knocking over a goblet of ancient wine because, you know, wine is totally the drink of choice for a king who's losing it, you can't help but wonder what the royal therapist would say. John, my goodness, have you tried breathing exercises? You might find they help with the whole dominating fear aspect of your leadership. Spoiler, medieval psychologists were more skilled in giving unsolicited advice than a Facebook grandma. And let's not forget how he interacts with his staff, who must be tiptoeing around the room like they're in a game of Don't Wake the Baby. One poor chamberlain approaches him, holding a scroll that probably contains a mind-boggling amount of taxes to be collected. Your Majesty, he dares to say, voice trembling like a leaf in a windstorm, a slight adjustment in the tax rate. Adjustment, John bellows. You know what adjustments I want to hear about. How about all the nobles adjusting their manners? Maybe I should start charging admission to see me lose my mind. You lot are as helpful as a bed made of nails. Well, you wanted drama, and the king is serving it up hot. His voice rises and falls like an otherworldly symphony. and at that moment, you wonder if it's too late to become a monk. At least monks have a solid reason for not wanting to leave their cells, like avoiding the immediate wrath of an insecure monarch. So there you are, witnessing a royal rage that's unfolding right before your eyes. The air feels charged with a blend of disbelief and morbid amusement that somehow makes you a little less tired while laying on your still plush throne of bated breath. Would he even realize how comically absurd he sounds, or would this tyrant continue, rehashing tired insults to poor unsuspecting nobles? Just think, in a time when the greatest achievement of your day might be getting a decent loaf of bread, you're surrounded by a king who considers his next tantrum as vital feedback for his court. If there were only an out-of-time reaction GIF to capture the chaos, like watching a cat unsuccessfully try to jump on a counter that proves to be way too high for its pride. As the sun sets beyond the horizon, casting long shadows that creep into this chaotic court, you realize King John might just be the biggest embodiment of no one's watching you've ever seen. Or spare a thought, maybe he's just been fazed by one too many bad hair days. As you drift off into slumber, remember this particular royal tale of mismanagement, and hope your own day brings fewer tantrums, at least in the presence of a drinkable vintage or two. Sweet dreams, in a kingdom somehow less chaotic than the one you've briefly inhabited. Asterisk, asterisk, Chapter 22, Barons and Tiaras. The Great Grumpy Gathering, asterisk, asterisk. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode where snoozing and snickering are equally encouraged. Tonight, brace yourselves for a rollercoaster ride through a moment in history that's packed tighter than your jeans after holiday feasts. We're diving deep into the High Middle Ages, a time when the elite pumpkin spice latte was probably just, well, a pumpkin. And if you're wondering whether that pumpkin was fresh, the answer is, no, it definitely wasn't. Imagine dusty roads that could use a good sweep, and noblemen dressed in clothes that scream, I was made from the leftover curtains. It's like walking into your favorite thrift store, but instead of discount prices, you have heavy foot taxes, perilous duels, and a king throwing tantrums that'd make a toddler with a candy shortage blush. And trust me, the stakes have never been higher. So, while you settle into your comfiest chair like a throne, preferably not of straw like, who needs a high living space anyway, take a moment to think, ever had a boss who thought too highly of themselves? Or maybe a roommate who just doesn't get the concept of personal space? Now, combine that with the weight of an entire kingdom and a page full of grievances about how they stepped on your favorite rug. Yikes, right? Alright, dim the lights, put on a cozy fan, and wrap yourself up tighter than King John could wrap a cluster of indignations. Now that you're all comfy, let's hop aboard the time machine and find ourselves at one of the most amusing yet dangerously serious assemblies ever convened. The gathering of the English barons, right under King John's nose. Congratulations. You've just woken up in the year 1215, where grappling with a cranky king is an everyday affair, and finding a decent cup of ale is akin to discovering another Netflix series to binge. Let's talk about the moment where a bunch of barons and elite gang of noblemen decided that enough was enough, and their battle robes felt more like a fashion faux pas than an emblem of authority. The air around you is thick with the aroma of unwashed horses, and, let's be real, excessive amounts of body sweat, because who had time for personal hygiene when plotting a rebellion against a monarch as moody as a cat caught in the rain? You stand among these steel-clad gentlemen, their faces grim and determined, but also slightly confused, as if they couldn't decide whether they were going to duel or attend a royal dressing contest. One baron, Sir Reginald the Reluctant, rubs the back of his neck nervously, muttering under his breath, "Why did it have to be Monday? Can't revolutions wait until at least Tuesday?" You chuckle quietly, realizing that a calendar conflict isn't exactly what an armed rebellion is supposed to hinge upon. "Listen closely, gentlemen," says Baron Alaric the Unsure, clearing his throat. His voice wobbles a bit, dodging between bravado and a touch of terror. "We must take a stand against King John's taxes, and by taxes, I mean all the ways he has shamelessly emptied our coin purses like he's searching for loose change under the couch cushions." The crowd murmurs in reluctant agreement, each man glancing at their battered robes that surely look less noble after the dozen ceremonial meals in honor of the king's most generous dining habits. The sun peeks through the clouds, casting an eerie glow on their faces, which only adds to the drama. You can practically hear the echo of sitcom laughter in the background, because what's more relatable than men trying not to roll their eyes while plotting a revolution? It's like watching a group of friends plan a trip while realizing they can't agree on the playlist. Feeling the anticipation, Baron Osgood, who is still trying to figure out if this is a serious meeting of noble minds or a competitive game of who looks the most ridiculous, leans in closer and whispers, "Do you reckon he'd trade his titles for a simple bit of respect? Or maybe we just write him a strongly worded letter. You know, like the ones lords wrote to complain about irregular mail service." You can't help but imagine King John receiving a letter adorned with fancy ink, filled with complaints. "Dear John, we are very disappointed. Kindly lower your taxes, or we will take our business elsewhere. Sincerely, agitated nobility." Time capsules may not reveal much about history, but you certainly wish they'd capture this sort of banter. As discussions bloom into heated debates, they begin wondering if they could instead vie to just pull out some royal glamour magic. One particularly audacious baron suggests, "What if we just threw a party? I mean, how can he resist a good banquet? Throw in some mutton and a few overcooked veggies, and I bet he'll forget all about taxes." It's absolutely absurd, and yet you can't shake the feeling that they might be onto something. Unfortunately, you know King John well enough by now. He wouldn't be bidding for the appetizer. He'd be diving headfirst into the dessert tray and throwing tantrums if the honey cake wasn't shaped like a crown. But alas, just as the barons fight confusion with haphazard proposals, the meeting spirals into a combative version of charades, with each man miming their most prestigious demands in over-the-top gestures, accidentally smacking adjacent barons in the face with floppy metal armor. You observe with humor tinged with a sense of foreboding. Conflicting ideals about what the kingdom should look like clash violently, much like medieval jousts, but thankfully, without the actual jousting. Each proposed grievance is, hilariously enough, punctuated by blaring reminders of previous failures. Remember when we tried to address this with a game of shuffleboard? It didn't end well, did it? The groans from the gathered barons echo like a well-rehearsed orchestra of disappointment. As tensions rise, you realize that amidst the chaos, a glittering dream of rebellion is forming, fueled by absurdity and bewilderment. It might just turn into a brotherhood of misunderstanding. After all, the only thing Baron Reginald really knows how to organize well is a hearty game of let's see how absurd this can get. So as you drift off into sleep, picture these barons, drenched in the absurdity of their plans, while trying to topple a king, dressed like a confused ensemble of misfit birds. It's quite the delightful notion that sometimes a gathering of grumpy nobility can lead to monumental change, or at least a good laugh that rings through the ages. Enjoy your dreams, and may they be as mildly interesting as history itself. Asterisk asterisk, Chapter 23. The Royal Grumble and the Document of Doom asterisk asterisk. Hey guys, welcome back to another delightful detour down the lopsided lane of history. Tonight, we're diving into an era as unruly as your last DIY project. But I promise it's filled with more plot twists than a soap opera marathon. Prepare for a stroll down the halls of power, where kings wore their crowns like they were trying to impress their weekend brunch crew. Let's talk about the moment we're about to witness. One that's colder than a spouse's stare when you forget their birthday. King John's reluctant signing of the Magna Carta. But before we get comfy, here's something to ponder. Have you ever met someone who thought they were always right, even when they spelled their own name wrong? Or had a co-worker who would argue over who gets the last slice of pizza, pitting their honor against the fierce spice of pepperoni? Now, imagine that angst magnified by 1,000, with swords and lavish feasts, just to spice things up. And while you're at it, envision a king who is as popular as a cold soup in July. Yup, we're talking about King John. Now take a moment to picture this scene. Dusty courtyards, exhausted from the weight of pompous ambition, where grumpy barons are gathered like reluctant dinner guests at a potluck. Ever wondered what they might have complained about? But John forgot the salad dressing again. Or how about, last time, he called me Sir Fumbles the Unprepared. Classic baron issues, indeed. Congratulations, you've just awoken in 12:15, on an afternoon charged with tension thicker than the aroma of burnt mutton at the last royal banquet. You find yourself standing amidst a gathering that has all the drama of a family reunion, but with far fewer potato salads. The English barons are ready to confront their royal headache, King John. Now, let's transport ourselves to the Grand Hall, where the atmosphere is as heavy as a chainmail coat soaked in rain. You can practically taste the anxiety mingling with the scent of musty wool as these noblemen shuffle about, their elaborate excuses for getting out of being here masked by their armor. What is that? You hear one of them mutter. Is that the faintest hint of an actual clean tunic? It certainly isn't. Clearly, laundry day was not on the agenda. And there he is, King John, grumbling more than a toddler at bedtime. The man embodies every overbearing manager you've ever encountered. You know, the one who hovers a little too close and has entirely too many unsolicited opinions on your coffee order. Yes, that's him, drumming his fingers on the table like an impatient 8-year-old waiting for pizza rolls to cook. His advisors surround him like overzealous parents, each one trying to convince him that, no, he doesn't need to sign anything. Maybe just a few more taxes instead? The barons, standing grim-faced, have formulated a plan, an intricate web of grievances designed to unleash a torrent of fury, as charming as a flatulent court jester. If he won't listen to reason, says Sir Wibbly of the Whiny, perhaps he'll take us seriously if we bring him a document. There are muffled snickers across the room. Because, let's face it, the last time a formal document was useful was the last time someone used a napkin at dinner. As the tension builds, one brave soul steps forward, Sir Barnaby the Bold, who, let's be honest, has to make up for that silly name somehow. He holds a piece of parchment aloft as if it were some sacred relic, despite it looking as if it had been written during a thunderstorm. Behold, he announces, the Magna Carta, a charter of rights that outlines our grievous dissatisfaction with King John's proclivity for exorbitant taxes and questionable banquets. Suddenly, King John looks less like a monarch and more like a slightly trapped rat. A charter? You want me to sign a charter? You can practically hear the internal monologue. Why not just hand me a plate of disputes and extra responsibilities? Who needs a peaceful kingdom anyway? The atmosphere thickens, and with all eyes directed toward him, you can feel his reluctance simmering. As if preparing for an unpleasant dental appointment, he approaches the desk where the parchment lies. The baron's anticipation is palpable, even as they exchange glances that say, is it just me, or is this like asking a cat to take a bath? And there it is, the moment when the king, as if signing a poorly thought-out movie contract, reluctantly presses his royal seal onto the document. Asterisk, Kerthunk. Asterisk. It's an ominous sound, like a very oversized stamp, declaring to the world, I have only the best intentions, maybe. Meanwhile, the barons, the circus of mischief-makers that they are, can barely contain their glee. If this were a modern-day reality show, you'd be waiting for one of them to break into a celebratory dance that would make everyone question their life choices. And you chuckle at the absurdity. You realize, amid the pomp and circumstance, that this document, this clumsy mess of agreements and grievances, is far more than a piece of paper. It's a turning point, a moment where the monarchy was shackled by words rather than swords. But for now, King John is left grumbling, circling around what he's just signed with all the glee of a kid who accidentally dropped their candy bar in the dirt. So, as you nestle into your blanket tonight, drift off with visions of barons dressed in absurd uniforms, attempting to woo a reluctant king who would prefer his disputes packaged with a side of roast boar. In the grand tapestry of history, these snippets of humor remind us that laughter and rebellion often walk hand in hand. Sleep well, dear listener, may your dreams be delightfully absurd. Asterisk asterisk. Chapter 24, The Horse, the Mud, and the King's Great Escape, asterisk asterisk. Hey guys, welcome back to another serene stroll through the pages of history, where kings were as clueless as your friend, who's convinced they can make homemade pickles without a recipe. Tonight, we find ourselves in an era muddier than a toddler's face after snack time, the High Middle Ages. So, grab your coats, because we're about to witness King John attempting a grand, yet hilariously tragic escape. Before we dive in deeper than a duck in a swamp, let's take a moment to appreciate modern life. Have you ever been late to work and had to abandon your car in a snowbank? Or perhaps you've sprinted down the street in a rainstorm, only to realize your shoes were more sponge than footwear? Now, imagine that, but instead of a morning caffeine fix, you're on horseback, with barons hot on your tail and your jewels sinking into treacherous muck. Intrigued? Let's get comfortable, shall we? Dim the lights, maybe. Put on a fan to cool you down, because heaven knows we don't need any more heated situations tonight. Congratulations. You've just woken up in 1215, smack dab in a marshy realm strewn with quicksand, where even your horse is questioning the life choices that led to this moment. You hear the squelching sound of hooves being sucked into murky wetness surrounding you like an unwelcome hug. You glance around and spot King John, a man more desperate than a cheese lover trapped in a vegan cafe, frantically urging his steed onward. Let's talk about this scene, shall we? Galumphing his way through a landscape resembling a muddy toddler's craft project, John, dressed in his royal garb, looks ridiculously out of place. His spindly legs dangle from the horse, the armor clanking like an out-of-tune orchestra, and his crown slightly askew bobs like a dandelion on a windy day. You can almost see the help wanted sign blinking above his head as he frantically beckons for his entourage. Hilariously, they have decided amidst this chaos that forgetting their horses was the right idea. Really, can't we just walk this one off? Oh, how the irony thickens. As mists rise, they cling to John's face, while the barons are not too far behind, churning through the muck like a horde of disgruntled villagers armed with pitchforks. Turn around! They yell, voices echoing like angry geese in the early morning. You can almost see their faces, twisted in suspicion, as they wonder how a king could fail to evade a couple of determined barons in what amounted to a muddy obstacle course. Despite the impending doom, John clings to the reins, directing his horse as if executing a highly choreographed dance move, but one that closely resembles tripping over your own feet in front of that cute neighbor. Every desperate lurch sends a spray of mud flying, splat, splatter, and times squoosh times, a symphony of sounds that would be oddly satisfying were it not utterly mortifying. It's a scene playing out like a slapstick comedy routine, only the punchline could cost the king his throne. Why must I endure this? You can imagine him muttering, a mix of protestation and realization settling into his very bones. Every squelch beneath the hooves is a reminder. This is what I get for ignoring my subjects. The very sand and grass seem to conspire against him, their tenacious grip an echo of all the baron's grievances, dragged along like receipts from a store you hope to forget about. And those angry barons, oh, how they close the gap. Picture them there, thundering through the swamp with a blend of determination and sheer bewilderment. Sir Fiddlesticks of Stubborn, because why have a simple name when you could be ridiculously comedic? Shouts, orders, while juggling different opinions on how best to catch the king. Should we commandeer a boat? No, let's throw a net. How about marching straight through? Yes to marching. There, bickering is a cacophony only rivaled by a catfight at dawn. But alas, mud doesn't just cling to kings, it devours their dignity in great messy mouthfuls. Every time John proclaims, "To the castle," the mud springs forth in loud defiance. It's like swimming through molasses, but with an audience who would prefer to debate their breakfast choices instead of helping you, not that you'd ever admit you needed the help of some disgruntled nobleman with pitchforks. And there it is, the tether pulling John back his precious treasure wagon, laden with jewels and promises, slowly sinking into the very muck from which he can barely hope to escape. You can almost hear the wallet gasp, the clanking of coins echoing through the muck as if announcing the absurdity of it all. You thought you could just trot away. Think again. Finally, with a thundering stampede of frustrated barons descending behind him, John spurs his horse onward, launching into a flurry of, "Hurry up and don't get stuck." The sounds of laughter, a mix of panic and desperation, echo in the air. It's more comedy than tragedy as he realizes that sometimes escape requires more than just determination. Sometimes it also requires a bit of common sense, neither of which seems to be available at the current moment. So, as you settle down to drift off, smile at the absurdity and grit of it all. King John's muddy flight through the swamps is a gentle reminder that even mighty rulers could stumble through life's muck, and not just in the metaphorical sense. Sweet dreams, dear listener. May you find your own escape routes that aren't shrouded in treacherous mud. Chapter 25. The Deathbed of King John, a royal who's who of whoopsies, Hey guys, welcome back to our delightful jaunt through history, where the most regal among us often proved less poised than a bird on roller skates. Tonight's episode takes place in a setting colder and creepier than your uncle's windowless basement. Newark Castle in 1216 CE. On a night so stormy it could be a plot twist in a discount horror flick. Now, before we plunge into this dimly lit episode of medieval melodrama, take a moment to appreciate your own cozy life. Have you ever missed a deadline and watched your plans slip away like a sock in the dryer? Or perhaps you found yourself at a party, tearing apart your snack only to discover the chips were as stale as a forgotten New Year's resolution. Imagine, instead of popcorn, you're feasting on a meal of regrets, served on a platter of dramatic irony. So, without further ado, let's pull on our metaphorical rain boots and step into the puddles of historical mishaps. Dim the lights a little deeper, toss on a fan for dramatic effect, because who doesn't love a breeze when imagining a storm? Get comfortable, and prepare for all the royal catastrophes our friend John managed to collect before his life plummeted down the slippery slope of history's worst blunders. Congratulations. You've just woken up in a castle where the rain sounds like persistent drum solos against the stone walls, and the air smells oddly of damp wool and despair. Yes, it's a particularly gloomy evening in 1216, and you find yourself beside the infamous King John, the man who would become a poster child for few things are worse than a backstabber unless you're the one doing the stabbing. Imagining you're in John's shoes or sandals, as the case may be, where do we even begin? First off, the bed he's lying in is less royal repose and more the unfortunate aftermath of a bad hair day. It's made of straw so flimsy that it looks like a giant hedgehog decided to take a snooze across his royal chamber. And the sanitation? Let's not even go there. In a moment worthy of a sad sitcom, King John's own body serves as a metaphor for his reign. A great deal of bloating, a few questionable choices, and a choking hazard, especially if someone dares to bring up the word Magna Carta around him. He lies there, all pallid skin and visible regret, the ominous storm outside reflecting the turmoil within him, because who wouldn't feel agitated when you've basically ruined a country like a toddler with a crayon and walls? Ugh, he groans, a sound as melodramatic as an actor in a midday soap. The room is eerily quiet aside from the persistent rain, each drop an echo of the countless mistakes littering his reign. The candles sputter like they're contesting for a role in a horror film as shadows dance ominously on the walls. How did I get here? You can almost hear him think, clinging to the last flickers of his dignity, like a toddler clings to a dummy. Let's take a second to appreciate how he managed to rack up such a sinister reputation. After all, it's no small feat to inspire tales so dismal they could almost make you feel sorry for him, almost. There's a lesson buried somewhere within his tale. Being a king is less about wearing a shiny crown, and more about dodging the pitchforks from disgruntled subjects lining up outside your castle, especially when you promise them the moon and give them a rock instead. As the rain thrums louder, John reflects on his notorious decisions, battles lost, people alienated, and the time he tried to enforce taxes with the delicacy of a sledgehammer. Did I really think that locking my subjects out of access to the forest would make them like me more? What was I even thinking? All thoughts clouded by an impending sense of doom, John anticipates the arrival of barons, those disgruntled noblemen, gathered just outside his castle, probably debating the merits of overthrowing a king who has all the grace of a one-legged duck. Their voices drift through the storm, echoing through the castle halls, sounding surprisingly chipper for a group with pitchforks in mind. Let's throw a party, one declares. It'll be a royal roast. But here's the hilarious irony. Even in this fateful moment, life still throws in some absurdity. A gust of wind bursts through the half-open window, sending the candle flames to dance crazily, and for just a second, John thinks he's about to meet his maker, not on account of broken treaties, but because of a draft. Because clearly, this king's foibles wouldn't be complete without a dose of slapstick. So he clutches at his chest, as if trying to ward off the impending heart attack that has been sponsored by poor choices and failed attempts at diplomacy. He muses to himself about all the times he said, "Sure, let's seize the lands of our enemies," reflecting back on his life like a botched episode of a reality show, real kings of history. But as the weather rages outside, it's also an echo of his own inner storm. You can practically hear him asking, was it all worth it? Spoiler alert, it wasn't. The only worth is the weight of regret pressing down on his overindulged heart. As you settle in and let the rhythmic cadence of history wash over you, remember this: even kings can face their own stormy nights when they've forgotten to consider the feelings of others. And as King John drifts away, you can gently smile at the thought that sometimes the only way to find peace is to finally admit less like a king and more like a soggy jester. I've made a bit of a mess of things. Sweet dreams await, dear listeners, wrapped in a blanket of royal follies and deep-seated chuckles. And now, as we step away from the glitter, gloom, and glorious disasters of history's worst kings, let your breath soften into something slow and warm. Tonight we wandered through courts where crowns sat heavy, where tempers flared brighter than torches, and where one bad decision could empty a treasury faster than a banquet table at Caligula's palace. We watched soldiers lift up a little boy in tiny boots, never guessing the storm he'd become. We sat quietly in the shadows of conspiracies, where whispers meant danger and loyalty could turn into a weapon. We drifted past feasts drowned in wine, senators pretending not to panic, and an empire trying very hard not to be swallowed whole by its own ruler's imagination. And somehow, through all that struggle and chaos, people still laughed, still worked, still endured, because humans always have. They woke every day knowing their ruler might be brilliant, or bored, or out of his mind, yet they kept going anyway. That resilience, that stubborn grip on survival, it deserves a quiet moment of honor. And now, take a look at your own world with a softer heart. You don't need to bow to a statue. You don't need to worry whether your leader plans to appoint a horse to public office. Your walls don't echo with plots and poisoned rumors. Your nights are calmer, your bed warm, your lamp steady and obedient at the flip of a switch. Let your muscles loosen. Let the day slide off your shoulders. Let the comfort of this moment wrap around you like a safe, quiet cloak. You're here. You've done enough. You can rest now. Close your eyes, breathe deep, and drift gently into sleep.